So if it tips over at any point, it's because of the way that I have it resting on.
It's fine.
Yeah. So I was just kind of introing the pod because we have Sky already on. That like we plan to talk about Calypso, at least do kind of our prequel for when she shows up on it like in the book for Percy Jackson. So this will be our introduction to who she is in mythology.
Hmm.
And then I know you wanted to talk some Luke stuff this week.
Yeah. Like basically labor trafficking. Like what he's actually doing, and it actually fits with this chapter or these chapters that we read for Battle Labyrinth because they bring up Chris Rodriguez in
Oh
these
yeah.
chapters and what happens to him, and that's a really great example of what he's doing there.
Yeah, so this is a part that I think gets like underplayed by the fandom. Like I never hear anybody besides us talk about it as much. But the fact that Luke had literally a whole cruise ship full of mortals, he was taking demigods, having them do these dangerous missions. The one that we read about today, as Shannon was talking about, we find out that Chris Rodriguez was going into the labyrinth
Hmm.
and that drove him crazy enough that he's like calling Clarice Mary and talking about Ariadne's string, but only really like the string.
Yeah, he literally, like, they, like, imagine, like, and especially because uh, you see Chris Rodriguez a little bit in the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like there as like Luke's friend on the show, even if he doesn't have like a huge role yet. That's who he is. Like he's another person that was in the Hermes cabin for many years. Um, so he's somebody that Luke was like good friends with. That's why he's one of the first kids that joins him. And
Mm-hmm.
even somebody like that, he's like, yeah, go into the labyrinth. This horrible, scary thing that is known for making people like lose their mind or get lost in there forever or never find their way out. You never see them ever again. Is constantly moving, and so you can never be sure where it is. You can't do anything to, and sending him in there to be like, okay, maybe you can find a way for me to figure out how to get through this thing, and doesn't, knowing that he doesn't know where he's going and he has no idea how to get out of there, and
Mm-hmm.
just like traps him in there anyway.
Yeah.
Somebody left a comment on one of my videos when I was talking about grooming where they brought up like it's not even just grooming, it's trafficking. And I was like, yeah, it actually is like labor trafficking, where he's convincing these kids that all already like him and respect him to join him so that they can literally just use them like their bodies so they can get them to do work for him so he doesn't have to do it. That's even what he's trying to do with like trying to convince Percy and then Thalia and anyone else to be like the portal or whatever you want to call it for Kronos when he comes back. He's just trying to get somebody else to do it so he doesn't have to. And he's just trying to that's it's so ridiculous because the like trafficking in general is something that people have an extremely distorted idea of what it actually is, and it like if I think about it too much it drives me completely insane, so I try not to because it's just so frustrating about how wrong, like sometimes I see people, like every once in a while I'll see like a random true crime video,
Mm-hmm.
and in the video they'll be like describing a situation and they'll be like, I don't understand what's going on, and I'm sitting there like watching this, I'm like, this is trafficking, but they don't understand what's going on because they don't know what actual trafficking looks like. And so the best way to describe it in like this sort of book is how Luke makes Selena be the mole. That's one of the most common ways that people get trafficked, where they eventually end up doing like being forced to do like sexual trafficking and things, is that sort of situation where it's like somebody that you think is like your friend or
Mm-hmm.
like a boyfriend, something like that. You think the person loves you and cares about you, and they tell you like, "Hey, this thing is happening to me. I need some money. Could you like help me get it because I just something happened. I just need this like an emergency."
Yeah.
And they like, because you care about them and they and you don't have anybody else around you that to like tell you this is a bad idea or like this story doesn't make sense or whatever, you go to do it because the person is like one of the few people probably that's being nice to you, because they usually pick people that don't have support systems.
Yeah.
And so that situation, like the whole like story with Luke, I guess the best way to keep it in mind is that his first plan, like if things actually went the way Luke would have wanted, he would have killed Percy and he would have stayed at camp.
Mhm.
And he would have just kept going back and forth from like leaving and coming back from camp and just doing everything from camp. And nobody would have realized that he was doing it for like many years. Percy surviving ruined that entire plan and made everybody find out about it way sooner than he wanted it to. And so when that happens, he needs somebody else in camp to like watch things because he can't be there anymore.
Mhm.
And so he goes to talk to Selena, a 13-year-old girl that he knows has a crush on him when he's 19, and uses his like good looks and charm and things like that to convince her to spy on her friends. And even then that doesn't work because she's a good person
Yeah.
and doesn't want to do that. And so he tells her like, if you spy on your friends, I'll kill less of your he literally says I'll kill them slower. Like I won't kill as many kids if you spy on them for me. And that puts some in a lot of like the stories of like trafficking overall is people in like these incredibly just impossible positions where there's like no clear way to get out. Like no
Mhm.
matter what kind of trafficking it is. Like when you're labor trafficking, it's like if I leave this job, I literally don't have another place to live. Because a lot of labor trafficking is they give you like a place to stay and it's like if you don't have that, like where are you going to go? You don't have a job, you don't have a way to like help you or like your family anymore. And a lot of times, especially in the United States, they also like use like their immigration status against them and are like if you don't work for me anymore, I'm going to like turn you in and
Mhm.
things like that. I worked for attorneys that help people like that all the time for many years, and that stuff was happening in 2015, much less what's going on right now. And
Yeah.
so that happens with like labor trafficking, and then with like more like stereotypical, I guess, like what people imagine trafficking to be, like sexual trafficking. It's like, well, you care about me? Don't you care about what's going to happen to me? And it becomes this thing of like you can't leave because this is the only way that you can make money.
Mhm.
And the higher like the debt you accrue under what you have to pay off, the more impossible it gets to get away, the less people you have in your life because they keep everybody away from you. And that's like very much what happens with Selena, is that it starts off as like her wanting to believe, I'm sure, that Luke isn't that bad of a person. But then, he attacks camp and tries to kill everybody right away,
Mhm.
and he keeps trying to do that kind of thing. And so by the time we get to like the book that we're reading right now, it's like, how is she supposed to tell everybody now?
Yeah.
After all of these years of this stuff happening, it's like, how do you go back now? And then there's also the thing of like, you want to believe that he was telling the truth.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of times the thing that happens in real trafficking too, is you want to believe that the person is like, if I just get this money, this person will let me leave. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to like admit to yourself, like, this person is never going to let me leave unless I just like literally run away. Because there's always going to be something that's going to make them say that I can't leave. You have to like get to that point. And like she has to get to that point too before she tells anybody about what he's doing with, like, what he's been doing with her for all that time. But that's him using like the people that he knows and what they think about him, like the idea they have of who he is, just to like get what he wants to like fill in like a literal body. Like
Yeah.
he can't be at camp, so let's like manipulate this teenage girl and make her feel guilty and responsible for all of the kids that I'm going to murder. Like, let me just tell her that if you do this for me, I won't kill as many of your friends, knowing full well that I'm planning on killing all of them,
Mhm.
and just like lie to her about it. And so that's like the stuff with him that I feel like people don't think about that much because they don't like it. And I understand why. Like, and then you, like what you said, bringing up like the people in Sea of Monsters, like that there is just humans on that boat that are just normal people.
Mhm.
And it's like, what are they doing there? Like a friend of mine was like, they're probably there for like the other monsters on the ship. And it's like, yeah, that is a good point because like why else would they, like, the monsters don't necessarily like eat people necessarily in the same way that like a lot of like monsters do in like other works of like fiction and stuff. But it is a thing of like, why else would he have normal people on this like depraved cruise ship that nobody else is ever going to be on this thing except for people that like are a part of their world, really? And so why would you have normal people, like normal families with like children? Like why would you take the time to basically like hypnotize them
Hmm.
into like acting like they're on a normal cruise ship if you weren't planning on doing something to
Yeah.
them later, or like experimenting with like the weapons you have or something like that on them because they're literal bodies that you can just use and then you can get rid of them when you don't need them anymore. And it's like those people aren't like, granted, at the like the end of Sea of Monsters, um you don't see like the whole ship when he tries to kill everybody, but
Hmm.
they don't really mention the like normal humans there anymore. And so it's like, are they gone? Like, did he do something with them between them and the end of the book? I don't remember if we see what's going on that ship before the last Olympian. We'll obviously find out when we're reading this book, but it's just that sort of a thing of he just uses everybody. Like
Yeah.
any person that's around him is there for a purpose that so that he can use them.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually like there's nobody's in his life that is like actually necessarily important to him, because even the most important people like Annabeth and Thalia, he uses them too. He tries to get Thalia to take his place with housing Kronos' body.
Yeah.
He is disgusting with Annabeth in the last like three books especially, but he uses their feelings, their like sympathy and empathy they have towards him to get what he wants. Like even the most important people in his life that he says he loves, that's like that's how he treats them, and that's like why it's just very complicated to talk about the stuff that he's doing, and it's not like an easy thing to just be like, oh well, he was traumatized as a kid, so
Yeah.
let
And
that go.
Kai has a great point. So it kind of displays like the current political situation going on, which like I can't stop getting it out of my head that fan fiction we read the one time where Percy in the fan fiction was like, "Oh, we should read Prometheus Bound." And then looking back at that and seeing Prometheus like, I helped out Zeus during the Titan War and look what he did to me. This is what dictators do to the people who helped them eventually. And like I mean, that's what happens when you only change the power from hand to hand and not change what the power is, you know? And she's also saying demigods who weren't cooperative were probably given to monsters. I definitely agree on that one. And also, like, once some of these demigods, because I don't know if they knew the caliber of monsters on Luke's side until they're actually there. And then you see Drakens and, like, you see giant scorpions and shit. And you're probably like, maybe I shouldn't go against him because I already have monsters after me anyway.
Yeah, let's not do that. But yeah, truly, like these kids, like how I imagine like actual like trafficking and whatnot happening. Like nobody goes to like meet somebody knowing that they're going to do that to you. You're going to somebody that you think is a nice person, and then they end up like they don't tell you the full story. They just kind of tell you little bits of the story, and then by the time you know the whole story, you're in so deep that you like can't leave, and you feel like you're too much a part of it to leave. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that people like Chris Rodriguez, he told him like, "Hey, you've been in Hermes' cabin all these years. You've never been claimed. If you join me, we can like change things with the gods and like make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else ever again," sort of thing. That was never like his actual goal. Like we get a clue of that in the chapters that we read for today of him saying like what he actually wanted. It has nothing to do with like the other kids at camp at all.
Yeah.
It's all about himself. And but like he gives him kind of like the elevator pitch, like the nice sounding story. And then by the time Chris Rodriguez is walking around in the labyrinth in the dark alone by himself with no way to get out, and his one of his supposed best friends is the one that trapped him in there. Like that's when he's realizing like who this person really is, and it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's very much like what that sort of situation is like. And I think it's I always think it's fascinating how much this book series mirrors what's going on in like our world now, and it's because those abuse dynamics are always there. Like there are always people who think if I'm just friends with like the maniacal, just like sadistic dictator abuser person, maybe I can get close to him and he like won't come after me. Like almost every like trend or like thing that people start talking about on TikTok since the election is people literally bartering for like a position of authority in like the time that we're in. And people literally just trying to find a way for like, you can't touch me, you can't hurt me because I'm being a good person because I'm saying this or I'm doing this. I'm like the best. I'm the most woke. I'm this, I'm that. So if I'm like this and I'm like that, then they won't come after me and they won't hurt me. They don't care about any of that. They don't give a shit. I wish that people would realize that and stop arguing with each other over it. But that's what those people are doing in the same sort of way. And, you know, Percy in the story is somebody that realized very early on that, like, that's never going to work because of his own, like, life experiences with Gabe and things like that. He knew that already. And so he didn't even try because he went through that whole thing already one time. And he's like, I'm not going to do that again. But, like, the other kids don't, and they know Luke more than he does. And so they don't want to give up the idea that they have of him yet. And then they end up in these really horrible situations that are not their fault at all. But that's like kind of like if you actually think about what he's doing, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he's telling these kids like 3% of what he actually wants to do, so that by the time they realize what he's actually doing, they're either dead or they can't get away or both. And that's what you have to do in order to like to have somebody like Luke, like somebody who thinks that they need to like take control in this sort of a way. You have to kind of do that. Like if you think that you're the one that needs to be in charge and nobody else can, you have to be willing to literally let everyone else fall to the wayside for your benefit.
Yeah.
And there's no way for you to do things like that and to have it and be like somebody who like brings people with you or has community or something like that, because at a certain point you're going to be asked to do something that hurts the people around you in order to keep going. And he's like willing to do all of that. So he's the only one that I honestly don't think any of the other kids at camp would have ever like done this stuff. I don't know. It's not something that's explainable about why he was able to, and I don't think it's really worth it to like spend that much time thinking about it because it's not something that's ever really answerable. Like there's lots of kids that have gone through things that like my dad or like Donald Trump or any other like villainous person you can think of has gone through, but they didn't end up like that.
Yeah.
Like I didn't end up like that. And at all, that's never even been something that's like really ever even entered my mind. And so it's like you just never know who is going to be like that, but he is somebody that is willing to do whatever it takes for him to get what he wants. And if we're going to do a TV show like this, where like Walker keeps mentioning that the end of season 2 is like much darker to match the tone of Titan's Curse, somebody in an interview recently asked him, like, it was like a joke kind of question, like, what is one of the monsters from Percy Jackson that you would never want to fight? He ended up saying Charybdis because he was like, what am I supposed to do with that? And I'm like, okay, that's a good answer. But at first he was thinking they were asking him like, what monster would I fight? Like, what monster do I think I could fight and like win? And he was like, Charlie, I guess, because Luke's basically a monster. and, and I was like, oh. That, like, of course, makes me happy. But then I'm also like, oh God, how bad is, like, the end of season 2?
Yeah.
Like, it's already pretty, like, atrocious in the book, but it's probably going to be much worse on the show to, like, match the overall theme of season 3. So it doesn't feel, like, so jarring going from one to the other.
Yeah,
Um,
it does need to be because, like, as we said, politically, like, the message behind the entire series is that you can change who's in power, but that's not going to change the dynamics. You need to actually have structural change to make things happen. And so, like, of course, right now, that's very needed. That's a very needed message right now of
yeah.
working together, embracing our strengths, building community with each other, making sure we don't leave anybody behind. All good things.
All good things. And that's yeah, I remember even when we read Sea of Monsters like last summer, that I remember saying, and when we were reading that book, like the TV show is gonna have to do something to explain how Luke goes from the person that he is at the end of at the end of the first book, to somebody that is like quite literally torturing Annabeth in the third book. And that's like his entire storyline is just torturing her for an entire book. And so, like, they're gonna have to show something in there to show how he got to that point to make it like a cohesive story for the audience.
Yes.
Um, and that's why I always wonder about the flashbacks with Thalia and what those will really be like, because they can expand on those in a lot of ways because there's not that many of them in the book, to like take up the time that they have where Charlie's like a series regular this year and things like that. Um, and so there's a lot there that they can add to him, and they're going to make all of that explainable. And that's why I keep saying, like Luke apologists, like the clock is ticking.
Yes.
I don't think you realize how soon this is going to happen for you, because it's going to happen by the end of season 2, even before we even get to season 3, because they have to set up what he will be like in season 3. And there's no, like, this show doesn't have like a question about, this isn't like the thing about this story that I always appreciate is that the, like, abusive people, there's never like a story of like, oh, you should feel bad for them, or there's like a question of like redemption for them, or maybe they'll be saved at the end. There isn't that sort of dynamic that happens in a lot of other works out there. It's like they show the people that are doing this as like somewhat human people. Like they show like the stuff that happened to Luke in his childhood to explain how he could have had the potential to get there, but they don't show it in a way to like explain away or to like make you, woobify him or anything like that. Every person that's like that, they don't like do this thing to like explain their tragic backstory or whatever, so that you will feel empathy for them, and they won't be like evil anymore. It's never that. It's like he's evil. He wants to kill everybody until he loses, and then he kills himself.
Yes.
There's never like a story of like, actually you need to forgive Luke and say that he was right and actually like give him a hug before he kills himself, or any of that sort of stuff. The last thing he does is hit on Annabeth
Yeah.
when he's like 23 and she's 16. And so that's the last thing he does, which is one of the grossest things he does. And so like there's no like redeeming qualities of him. Not Luke, like Rick Riordan himself has said, Luke is never redeemed. And part of his story that is sad is that he had opportunities where he could have been redeemed and he chose not to. And he said, like, it is sad when people have the opportunity to do that and they choose not to do it. You just hope that the next time they live their life in another form that they won't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah.
But that's always an important kind of story, that you can see them as like a full person doesn't mean that you just like excuse what they've done. Like seeing them as a full person helps you understand how somebody could end up that way and things like that, but it doesn't mean that you're just like letting what they did slide.
Exactly.
that it's not like one or the other. And people talk about it a lot, especially in like TV and movies and things, as like one or the other. And so having a story like Luke where like they show what happened with his mom in The Last Olympian and then not exaggerating, and like the very next scene is when Thalia tells Percy like you cannot be nice on him now. He had plenty of chances to turn around and he never did. He's the reason why I died because he was the reason why they like all these monsters were after us in the first place. Annabeth is too weak about him because she still sees him as her hero. You can't be like weak about him too. He has to die. Like literally the scene after that, she is like, no, 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 don't even think about it. And so they very much set like a clear idea of how they want you to think about him. And it's not like a Snape story at all. Even like a Draco story, even though that's lame as fuck.
Story.
Yeah, it's like it's not any of that kind of thing at all where they're trying to like excuse away him at the last second and say that he was redeemed. They're not doing that kind of thing at all, and that's like I think that's very much needed to show not only somebody that's like a complex person, but also acknowledge that they never wanted to be better and they had every chance to be better, but they chose not to. That's like a difficult thing for people to grasp, I get, but it is like a very big part of our world. And I feel like when you realize that is when you start like backing off on the crazy punitive like carceral justice
Yeah.
shenanigans that people do a lot of the time, especially online, because when you see even somebody that's done a lot of shitty things as like an actual person, it's a lot harder to just leave them like really mean comments all the time or talk about them in such a horrible way and things like that because you see them as like a person and you just don't want to do that. Like there are people online that I really don't like, but I just block them. And every once in a while I'll talk about them, but hardly ever because I'm just like, what's the point? I just don't get the point. I'm not going to dedicate myself to somebody that I don't like. That just doesn't make sense to me. There's other things that I could talk about instead.
Yeah. Yeah. People spend way too much time on that shit, honestly. And yeah, like I lost my train of thought, but like it's kind of I made a video on this earlier, but like I feel like we're conditioned right now to polarize each other. Like so polarized. You can't be middle ground on anything. You're either on one extreme or another. Middle ground on anything. You're either on one extreme or another. And this whole thing is kind of like it fits into the narrative of the books as well because you think like Luke goes in such a way where he's like, it's only the Titans are going to be our saviors. If we take over, it's going to be fine. But Percy is kind of he almost is this middle ground because he is like, and I don't remember the final moment, but knowing that he hands a knife over to Luke, like that's not a middle ground moment. Or I mean, that's not an extreme moment. That's a middle ground moment. That is like a yes, you've done terrible things, but I see you right now. I see you trying to do what's supposed to be done, so I'm going to recognize that. And we don't do that a lot for people that we are against, so to speak. Like, I see you doing something good. Here is a compliment, or like here is a hand up. And because we've been so conditioned to be like enemies of each other, I mean, I hate to be that person, but we're not seeing that the bigger enemy is the man, it's the government, it's like the powers that be. It's not each other. It's we're just in this state where we're constantly mad at each other and it's so useless.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before about like every thing that people have like argued about online since the election is people trying to like barter their place. It's like everyone knows that they're in danger, and so they're all trying to find a way to make themselves feel like they're safe by trying to like be like, I'm not the bad one, those people are. And it's like every time that happens, I'm like, can everyone just like finally learn that you need to stop because that's never going to go the way that you think it will. It's never going to lead to like what you want it to be because there's never going to be a time where the people you're trying to do that for, to like kiss up to basically, is going to even care that you're doing that. They're going to go after you the same way as everybody else. They don't care if you've convinced yourself that somebody else is worse off than you and in more danger than you actually are.
Yeah.
They just don't care. And like that's like the stuff that I always like end up talking about that makes people like foam at the mouth is when I talk about like a generally abusive people and not and like saying like no, I don't think it's worth it for a lot of times for those people to go to prison. Like even though some of them do, I don't think that it helps anything. I don't think that it's worth it for those people to go to prison if all they do is sit in there and not even have like a chance to actually learn what they've done. It doesn't make what they did like better, but it does mean that they have a chance to like recognize what they did and how they hurt people. And like that's all I would ever want is for them to realize that and understand what they did and how they why what they did how they hurt people and why that was wrong for them to do and for them to like understand how they got there themselves because abusive people do wonder that even if they won't admit it. I know you do because my dad would talk to me too much, and so I know that they do. They wonder like how they got there and they try to justify a way for it to not be their fault when it obviously is. And they're like desperate for it to not be their fault. And so I know those things about them, and I would rather them understand so that we can understand also better how people end up in that sort of situation than to just like say that they're evil, throw them into prison where I never have to think about them ever again because it just happens again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And that's like the kind of stuff that I always think about is like I'm tired of that. I don't want that. I just don't want this stuff to continue. I would rather talk about it in the way that we do to try to like have people understand this stuff better. And like if somebody does even the worst stuff, but they understand at a certain point and recognize what they did, then I feel like their life wasn't a complete waste.
Mhm.
And that's what I would want. Like that's what I want. And I feel like that's what most victims like me want, honestly, is something like that. Like carceral justice doesn't really do much. And so even though it's in a like an unpopular thought to have, like the like people getting mad at Trump supporters and things like that, I just don't like it. Because I'm like those people have been like horribly abused too, even if they're doing things that harm you. They are also being horribly used and manipulated and abused too. And I want them to understand like how one day,
Yeah.
so that they have a chance to like understand how they got there, so they don't end up in that sort of situation with somebody else.
Exactly.
And like I don't know, maybe this sounds like overly optimistic, which is funny coming from somebody like me, but like nobody is ever past like the point of like saving.
Hmm.
Like there's always a chance for them to like realize just a little bit what they've done to other people in their life.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're going to do that, and you have to like look at that person and decide whether you think it's worth your time to like talk to them. But I don't like I don't like celebrate Trump supporters losing their jobs, their families, their lives, especially their jobs and things like that. I just don't because I'm just like that's it shows that they are being harmed by the system that they're trying to uphold, and that's sad. Like it's sad that those people are voting against the people around them and their own like actual beliefs a lot of the time because they are so desperate to think that the system will somehow work in their favor, and they would rather take that chance than to like support the other people around them, even if it means that they never get like the like fantasy of what they want,
Yeah.
of like suddenly having a bunch of money and like life being easier and things like that. It's a lot harder to stick it out with normal people.
Yeah.
But it is necessary to me. It's the only way that anything's ever going to like actually get better is when people do things like that. But it is hard, but it's also like it's really hard to do that if every time those people get online and they say like my farm is going out of business because Trump passed this law and I didn't realize when I voted for him that he was going to do that, especially because like in the Percy Jackson books and like the world that they have with the gods, the world is like is tr- it tries to desensitize you, and it's one of those things of like when nothing ever gets better for a long time, you almost kind of feel like things aren't real in a way.
Mhm.
And so a lot of like the kids, I think, that join like Luke's side, for instance, in the story, I feel like they do that because they're like so tired of how things are going,
Mhm.
and they're willing to like do something crazy like that because they don't actually think that he wants to kill all the gods. They don't actually think he's going to like kill all the kids at camp. They don't think he's actually going to do that. They just kind of like the idea of somebody trying to do something that like shakes things up a little bit. In the same way that I think a lot of people are feel like our government stuff is so fake because nothing ever changes no matter what anybody says,
Yeah.
that they like the idea of voting for somebody like that because he's different, and they don't think he's going to actually do the things he says he's going to do, because he thinks that he's just like showboating or whatever. But they just think like, oh, they're look at it at almost like a movie because all of this stuff feels like fake, when for like millennials, our entire like lifespan, we've just watched things get worse and like nothing ever changes, and people just keep saying the same things over and over again, but nothing ever. So like after like 30 years of that, you just are like, what if I do like this crazy thing and see what happens? Um, and because I don't think this guy is actually going to do any of this stuff, I'm just like almost like interested of what this character will do.
Mhm.
Because it does, because no matter what happens with that, it feels like our lives never change. So why not like see what like the anti-hero villain person is going to do when they're in charge? That's like how we ended up in this sort of place, because nothing ever changed for so long. It just all felt like it wasn't real,
Yeah.
like how those kids did that, and then they realized how bad that he actually was telling the truth about that stuff, and they paid the price for that. But it's just, I don't know. This whole, I always say this, with this TV show being on the air right now, is just like, what is happening? That it's on the air right now.
Yeah, well, honestly, we should talk about that too because the FCC thing that came out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Becky shared on her Threads account something that was saying that Disney is going to be investigated by the FCC for their DEI initiatives. And the reason that that is scary, particularly for Percy Jackson, is because this production has been nothing but diverse. We have women writers. We have, like, I don't want to say race swapping because I know that like we've gone beyond that when it comes to this casting, but we have race swapped cast some way. And so it's scary knowing that the future of where these books are headed to is going to include more queer characters. And like, what does that mean for the rest of this production? There's still people that are like mad at season one, but honestly, I feel like we could get the fandom on board, even the people that claim that they hate the TV show, if we just like, hey, so they want to censor us. Like, all of them would be like, fuck no, you know? It's,
Yeah, it's especially interesting. I'll say that the FCC has decided to investigate them when they have just started production for season 3.
mhm.
So that like that's when I saw that, I was like, we are in danger, because in season 3 there's a 10-year-old child who's gay. There is Zoe, who's essentially an indigenous person. Those are just the people I can think of off the top of my head right now. Sorry. But this show is like the definition of what those people think DEI is
Mhm.
this sort of show. Like, it would be very easy for them to like go after it because it was the number one show on Disney Plus last year.
Mhm.
And not only is there a lot of diversity within the cast, there's a lot on like every level. Like, the one of the main producers is a woman of color. The like the writers room not only has women, it has like out like non-binary people who are people of color in like the writers room. Like they added more women and like a black non-binary person in season 2 to the writers room. There's no white men that they added. And like yeah, the 3 showrunners are men. Like Rick Riordan is the most known person, even though him and Becky are both executive producers for the show together, and they are both in all of the writers' room meetings, um, because she told us that. And so, like, we know that that's true, but with this sort of cast, I was just like, oh my God, especially with like the kind of storylines they have coming up with these different characters and stuff. It's honestly like really scary to imagine Disney going after them right now. And that's like what always made me nervous about when he won. And I was like, these are children. And I really don't want them to somehow be caught in the middle of this political chaos by just acting on a TV show like this that before he was elected was just seen as like this wonderful, beautiful thing. And it is still a wonderful, beautiful thing. But now that beautiful thing is seen as being like ugly by people who find that sort of thing horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary to imagine them trying to censor it or them trying to force them to cast different people than they would want to do, or just like making them very uncomfortable when they don't want to. Like Becky herself said in that post, like Disney is like a big company or organization. Like she was basically saying, like we work with people at Disney that are not at all how you like people are sometimes how it is characterized, because the people at the top are not at all like everybody involved. Like the person that is in charge of scripted TV shows for Disney Plus is a black woman. She was at the Emmys with them and was taking pictures with them. And I
Yeah.
was like, no fucking wonder this show has been like renewed so fast if that's the person that's in charge of everything for scripted TV shows at Disney. And so it's like that person is not going to be like maybe the CEO or something like that. And so that is a good thing to keep in mind when it comes to this sort of show, that there likely will be people that will try to protect them from anything happening, but it is like a scary thing. They generally don't know.
Yeah.
Like in it, Becky said, like, we don't know what's going to happen or what this even means. But it's just like a scary thing to see them going after Disney because the shareholders voted, like 99% of them voted to keep DEI initiatives. And so now they're going to try to like punish them for doing that. Um,
And
and
kids are
yeah,
the ones that need that shit the most. Like,
yeah,
um, we we grew up in an era, me and you, where we didn't have queer representation, especially you, like as an asexual person. Like there were some bisexual representation, especially once I got to my teenage years. But there asexual representation probably still sucks, you know?
yeah,
And so if we had had those examples as children, like we would feel so much more confident in our identities. It wouldn't have caused our identities. I want to be clear here. They exist with or without these media. It's just making us feel less alone.
yeah. Like I didn't know what asexuality was at all until I was 27.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a, I was 27. And the only reason I knew about it was because of BBC Sherlock, which is why I like always loved that show, no matter how ridiculous Stephen Moffat is because I remember when the first season aired, that was back in like 2011 when like Tumblr was still like new, and I was on that for like a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, I kept seeing posts on there of people saying like, I feel like BBC Sherlock is asexual. And it was like teenagers I was talking about it. I had no idea what that word even meant. And I remember Googling it and looking it up, and I was like, I think that's what I am. And I had never seen that word before in my life. And like I remember going on YouTube and trying to find like videos from people who were talking about that they were ace, and I found like two channels. One of them I was still subscribed to up to like a year ago when they stopped making videos. That and they were like the only people that I saw talking about it. And so yeah, I was 27 until I even knew that the sexuality that I am even existed. And it's not like I didn't already feel that way. Like the entire time when I was in high school and I was in college, I was just like, why is everyone else obsessed with dating when I don't care about this at all? It seems like scary to me. I don't want anything to do with this. And I remember like always having these like circular thoughts up until I was like that age, until I realized that asexuality was something that existed. That I would just keep thinking like, am I gay? Like people think that I'm gay because I don't like boys. And I'm like, but I don't think that I'm gay because I don't really feel anything towards like girls either. And I'm like, so maybe I'm just straight. And I would just be like, I guess I'm just straight, even though that didn't make any sense because I didn't know what else I could possibly be. And then when that, I was just like, maybe I'm just nothing. Maybe I don't have a sexuality. Maybe I'm just somebody that doesn't have one. I just like somehow don't have one. And that's what a lot of ace people think before they realize that what their sexuality actually is. And so it's still very lacking in like representation. There are ace characters in Percy Jackson, the Olympians, canonically. So like Reyna, that's in the Heroes of Olympus books, is ace. She like talks about feeling like that, and Rick Riordan has explicitly said that she is. And I'm pretty sure there's other characters that match that later on too, but I know that she at least is because she's one that we really like. Like fans really like her in the Heroes of Olympus books. And so she definitively like is. There's a whole storyline in that book where one of her prophecies says that she will never like get like the feeling of like love and like feeling whole through like a relationship. The feeling of like love and like feeling whole through like a relationship, basically. And she like doesn't know what that means and things like that. But like looking back at that now, I was like, oh, when I read those books, I just didn't realize like what he meant, because that was like right when I first realized what that even was. And I just didn't realize that's what he was trying to say at the time. And so there is a little bit of that in this series, but
And
yeah.
I think both of us, like, because we grew up in an age where gender identity wasn't talked about, both of us are like, girl, question mark? Like, what? I don't know what to call myself. Am I allowed to be non-binary? Like, there's moments that both of us have of that still because we didn't grow up with this shit, you know? Like, I had a somewhat unique example because I grew up San Francisco Bay Area, you know, like San Jose. The high school that I went was a performing arts magnet. So gay kids up the wazoo, gay teachers up the wazoo. But my experience of bisexuality in high school is people come out, like soft come out as bisexual, and then eventually they're like, wait, no, I'm full on gay by the time they graduate. And I never saw somebody like, no, I actually am bisexual. Like, I actually feel something for both. It was always like a stepping stone, in my eyes at least. So I was like, wait, what am I then? Like, you know, what,
Like you can just stop. You don't have to continue to something else. I will say, like, my best friend in high school was, or he still is gay, but I just say was because we're not friends anymore. And he was teased a lot when we were in school about people being pretty sure that he was, but I graduated high school in 2003, and you did not come out unless you wanted to get the shit beat out of you, and like
especially
literally.
where you're at. Like,
Yeah, literally. Like there were gay kids at our high school that got beat up for just saying that they were. And it's not like safe exactly right now, but it was even less safe because at least if that happened to you, people would like, you knew that people would be upset for you. Back then it was like a question about how they might feel about something like that. That was during those years was when Bush was president and he was making states vote to make gay marriage illegal when it was already illegal. And like he literally spent like millions of dollars having states vote to make something illegal that was already against the law. And so that's the kind of like, you know, world that we were in at the time. And so I would always yell at people when they would to like literally start yelling at people in like the hallways of our high school when I usually was like a very silent person that like hardly ever spoke to anyone, which would always like freak people out, but that's like how I was at the time. And when people would say that kind of stuff about him, and like even with like my sister and stuff, she would be like, how do you not know that he is? And I'm like, I he says that he's not, and that's all that matters. If he is, I'm not going to like push him and make him uncomfortable by trying to force him to say that he is before he's ready. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. I'm going to support him where how what he says is going on right now and give him the time to like figure it out himself and like be able to like say what he is himself. I'm not going to like try to make him say it just because I want him to. That's not fair. And so I did see that stuff going on and was somebody who felt that way about that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know, like the church that I went to when I was like 9 or 10 got picketed by people in our hometown because they let gay people come to our church.
Mhm.
And so like that was just like something that I was aware of, and I never understood why people did that when I was a kid. Like my church didn't ever say anything like that. It was the opposite of that. Clearly, since people were protesting us from the mega churches in the area, and there's a lot of them out where I lived. And so that kind of stuff matters. And so like seeing that stuff be like in danger does make a big difference. Like Nico as a character means a lot to a lot of young kids
Yeah.
who are queer or gay or anything under the like the queer umbrella, because like do you like I need people to like almost understand. I know we've talked about this before, but I just always have to state it. Like, do you know how rare it is in a children's book series for them to make the youngest child in the series gay? And for them to like not make it like he's just confused or somebody manipulated him or he's in danger or he's gay because he was traumatized or whatever. Instead, it's a very like understanding, empathetic story where you are like one of the worst scenes in all of Percy Jackson is when he is forcibly outed
Mhm.
by a god that like forces him to tell people about it before he's ready. Like you're so angry about that. And in that book, when that happens to him, he's thinking about that one myth where they say that like man and woman were like separated before birth and you're supposed to find your other half. It literally ends with him being like, what does that mean for me? And
Okay, so this comes from Plato. I have a beef with this particular thing. So Plato and Aristophanes, I've talked about Aristophanes with the Impuzai. I do not take their mythology seriously as like a source material.
mhm,
So
mhm,
the Plato myth is that originally humans were double formed and they had like two faces that faced outward. You can look at pictures of what it was supposed to look like, but it's like a big ball person with like two heads, four arms, four legs, that kind of stuff. But it does say in that myth that some were men and women, some were women and women, some were men and men. It does not say specifically like men, women. So that's part of why people like that. My beef with it is I'm pretty sure that the character whose mouth that Plato puts it out of, because remember his writings are dialogues. It's a bunch of philosophers talking about shit, arguing about shit. The person whose mouth he puts it in is, I believe, a direct parody of Aristophanes. So I'm just like, no, this is meant to be ridiculous and funny, and is coming from people when they're already fully drunk in this symposium. Okay, so like, I don't take too much stock in that myth. I'm saying that not just for you, but for baby Nico.
yeah. And I will, and we're not even talking, we haven't talked about like the Magnus Chase books yet.
We'll get there eventually.
But like a gender fluid character being like one of the main characters, that's the main character's love interest, that who just like know, and the main character just knows what gender she is or they
Mhm.
are because they just know them and understand them, where they don't even have to tell them
Yeah.
which which pronouns they want to use during a given day and things like that. Becky loves that story. Like she talks about every ship in Percy Jackson on thread. She posts about Alex and Magnus more than anyone else, which I like because I feel like she has similar like gender things in that way because she's similarly talking about like I'm a woman, I guess. But like she's always saying like I don't act like, feminine or like or how you're supposed to act or whatever. And she's very comfortable with like her like masculine side and I'm like, yeah. Yeah, whatever like gender expression that is, that's what I would be too. And so it makes sense why we would like a story like Alex and Magnus especially because they don't exist in the normal gender binary at all. But it just is like with this sort of book series, I just have to acknowledge that always that there's a lot of queer people in it. And it's weird to think about how like the Heroes of Olympus series when they made Nico like canonically gay and did that really good storyline of him saying that he realized he was when he realized how he actually felt about Percy and didn't know how to talk about it and just like stayed away from him and why he had like so many weird issues with it because he didn't know how to feel or how to tell anybody about it because he was afraid of what everyone would think. That's like a very normal sort of way for people to figure that stuff out. And then going right into like the Magnus Chase series, those book series, when it comes to like queer representation, how they talk about queer identities and like just being queer, still right now in 2025 is progressive when it comes to like publishing. Those books that came out 10 years ago are still progressive for the books that are coming out now, especially in children's literature. And that's just like weird to think about how those came out so long ago. But there's still a lot of children's books that don't bring up those sort of identities. Even like the other stories, like one I like that they do. Well, I always like that they make Will bisexual. It's not one or the other. He's bisexual, just to, like show like, hey, those people exist, guys. And sometimes they're even boys. Usually it's bisexual like women that people think about, not men. And also the story with Piper, where she realizes that she doesn't know if she's like a lesbian or she's bi or pan or whatever yet, because that kind of stuff takes time to figure it out. But she realized afterwards, like, I also like girls, and I'm not sure, and like I was like conditioned to think that I liked boys. And I still love this person that I was with that was a boy, but now I want to be with a girl, and she's been in a relationship with a girl, and it like when you reread the Heroes of Olympus books and think about that, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
For some of the ways that she talks about things, like it feels like she's trying to overcompensate for like her own like kind of like real identity, where she's trying to like be a really good girlfriend to the guy that she's with, to the point of like being really hard on like Percy, because Percy is seen as like competition for him in an unfair sort of way, because she's trying to like be how she's supposed to be, I guess.
Yep.
Anyway, you talk about Calypso now.
Yes.
God.
Okay. So, we have danced around Calypso for months now because we did Epic the Musical and we had to stop before we got to Calypso. And so I prematurely was like, hey, let's talk about Calypso next week, not realizing she's not in these chapters yet. But I figured I would at least set us up for some success. So we're going to talk about who Calypso is in source material, because I know I got enough to work with to like actually talk about. First thing I want to say is that because people like to get on us about which source material we're taking from, Homer is the oldest edition of who Calypso is, and it is the most detailed that we have. Everything else is either a couple lines or fragmented, and so we don't know a lot about her outside of Homeric Calypso. So Calypso, I know that this matters more to classicists than normal people, but it's kind of interesting to look at. The repeated words used to describe Calypso are: she is fair-haired, this person translates it as lovely braids, and I didn't look through the Greek enough to know if there's something about her braids, and lustrous, and she's frequently referred to as goddess. So even though she's a nymph, they switch between nymph and goddess. It's not too particular here. So if we say the word goddess, you guys can't get mad at us because Homer did it too. One of the first things we find out about like Odysseus is that he has been sitting on her island for years at this point. So let's see. At the beginning of book 5 of the Odyssey, the gods are meeting and they're saying, hey, Odysseus is still on Ogygia, and should we let him go now because Calypso's holding him captive? The words actually used, so what Athena says is, think, not one of the people whom he ruled remembers Odysseus now. He's been gone that long, war and being on Calypso's island. That godlike man and kindly as a father to his children. Now he's left to pine. That's how this author translated it, but the word pine, like that I believe he's taking it from in the Greek, is the word, it is a word to lie down, like to spread yourself out, but the connotation in which it's used in different like instances that we have are, it's used when someone's lying down sick. It's used when like there is a body that is spread out and neglected and unburied. And so you have to think there's like a metaphorical death in Odysseus being held here on Ogygia. Then we have, he's racked with grief. The word grief here, pain, like deep, deep pain. And in the nymph Calypso's house, she holds him there by force. 2 force words are used for that phrase. We have restraint and by force. She restrains him by force. Like it says it so clearly that he is forced there. We find out that the gods are ready to send him on his way. Calypso's held him long enough. We get a full account of actually what's going to happen to Odysseus after he leaves. Like, oh, he's going to be sailing for 20 days. He's still going to face a lot of obstacles on the sea. He's going to be on a raft, a makeshift raft that he made himself. So we just got to send him on his way. And so they dispatch Hermes to go to Calypso's island to go talk about like letting Odysseus free. When he gets there, she is playing wife. She is fully playing wife. We see her sitting at her loom. The shuttle's going back and forth. So the shuttle being the part that you drag back and forth in the loom. And she is singing. Breathtaking voice singing. Now, one thing that I want to like clear up, because we have used the words like she drugs Odysseus, it's like a metaphorical drugging. She's a goddess. So she is enchanting. Her voice is enchanting. And not only that, but once Hermes steps foot on Ogygia, he, like, Homer remarks that it's such a breathtaking sight on this island that even Hermes is spellbound by the island itself. And let's see, so skipping forward, he talks to her, he tells her about what she has to do. I need to read her rant, and it's because of what we brought up with somebody blocking you that made this exact argument, but I'm just going to read this whole thing. It is long, but stick with me for a second. Okay, so she calls him hard-hearted, you are, you gods, you unrivaled lords of jealousy, scandalized when goddesses sleep with mortals openly, even when one has made the man her husband. So when Dawn with her rose-red fingers took Orion, your gods in everlasting ease were horrified till chaste Artemis, throned in gold, attacked him. Out in Delos, shot him to death with gentle shafts. So talking about one lover that got shot up, that was a goddess's lover. And so when Demeter, the graceful one with lovely braids, gave way to her passion and made love with Aeson, bedding down in a furrowed plow 3 times, Zeus got wind of it soon enough, I'd say, and blasted the man to death with flashing bolts. Zeus took down Demeter's lover. So she's taking 2 instances of goddesses and mortal men. She says then, so now at last, you gods, you train your spite on me for keeping a mortal man beside me. The man that I saved riding astride a keel board all alone when Zeus, with one hurl of a white hot bolt, had crashed his racing warship down on the wide dark sea. So the context there is this is after the crew eats the cattle of the sun god, and Zeus is the one that takes down the ship. Everybody but Odysseus dies. So she's taking credit. I'm the one who plucked him from those waves, so I should get to have him. Yeah, we see her do this in Percy too. So of course we have to highlight how she does it.
That's what I think is always so interesting when it comes to her, is that even if you read just like the Wikipedia, like, entry or whatever about the myth of Calypso, after reading the Percy Jackson chapter, you're like, okay. Like, it just, after you read that, it becomes, there's so many things that are similar. Like, Hermes is the one that is talking to her when Percy's out of it and he's first waking up. So you know that he's there, if you read the original myth, to tell her like, let him leave, and she's not letting him leave again, like in the original myth. And you know that she's like enchanting Odysseus to stay, and she's trying to enchant Percy, and then successfully does with Leo to stay. Like, they even leave on a raft, both of them.
Yeah,
they
nothing on the island. Like, that's
Yeah.
why they have to leave on the raft.
Yeah, and there's so many similarities that, like, Rick Riordan is not an idiot. People talk about him sometimes like he is a teacher. He is teaching you. He's not going to like spell it out for you in that sort of a way, because that's not a good story. But like, everything that you need to understand that character is in the story, because it's in the original story. And so it's one of those things, if you look back at the original story, if you're not sure, that makes like the context very clear. And that was always like the crazy point with like the epic stuff when it first started, was like the myth of Calypso. She is never like a good person, because that is like her archetype in these stories, is somebody like this. And so like, you have to keep that in mind when she's used in stories, because that's what her character is being used for, or usually is, at least.
Exactly. Like, so she goes on. There all the rest of his loyal shipmates died, but the wind drove him on. The current bore him here. And I welcomed him warmly. I cherished him, even vowed to make him immortal, ageless all his days. But since there is no way for another god to thwart the will of storming Zeus and make it come to nothing, let the man go. So she, like, that's not the complete end of her rant, but that's where she just switches from, like, yeah, you guys just don't want to see goddesses happy. Like, I saved him, I deserve this, but I guess if Zeus says, and I have to make it happen. So it's very begrudging that she lets him go. And she's basically like, I'll let Zeus's will happen, but I don't like this.
It's just funny to me how she's like, you guys get to rape people all the time. Why don't I get to do it for longer?
Exactly.
Like, I'm not sure that's something you should ever say out loud.
So after that, she goes to find Odysseus. And I highlighted a lot when she goes to find Odysseus, because even the way that he's described here. So let's see. She found him there on the headland, sitting still, weeping, his eyes never dry, his sweet life flowing away. And that's actually from the Greek. Like, his life is literally leaving him as he's sitting there wailing. With tears he wept for his foiled journey home, since the nymph no longer pleased. In the nights true, he'd sleep with her in the arching cave. He had no choice. Unwilling lover alongside lover all too willing. And to be clear with the Greek again, it says willing and not willing. It's literally the same word, just one has a negative in front. So they're being very black and white here with he's not willing anymore. Like, it might have been fun in the beginning. He might have like been spellbound so much that in the beginning he got swept up into it. But at this point, he's done. He wants to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So the next kind of like big thing that we get about her character here, Odysseus, who has spent years with her at this point. When she's like, I'm going to let you go, I'm going to help you build this raft, the gods will it so we're just going to let this happen. He's like, are you? Because I don't trust you. Like, he pretty much is like, how do I know this isn't another one of your tricks? and she has to swear on the river Styx, which like is super super serious, in order to convince him, like, I'm actually gonna let you go. I'm gonna treat you the way I would want to be treated in your situation. Like, we are far away, so I don't necessarily have a crew or a ship to offer you, but I got all these trees and I got some fabric so we can build a raft. Yeah. They have one last dinner together before he gets to building it out. And this dinner is where she really lays on the manipulation because it says the lustrous one took another approach. So then, royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, man of exploits, still eager to leave at once and hurry back to your own home, your beloved native land, good luck to you, even so, farewell. But if only you knew deep down what pains are fated to fill your cup before you reach that shore, you'd stay right here, preside in our house with me, and be immortal. Much as you long to see your wife, the one you pine for all your days, and yet I just might claim to be nothing less than she, neither in face nor figure. Hardly right, is it, for a mortal woman to rival an immortal goddess? How? In build, in beauty? And Odysseus has to be like, yeah, you are hotter than my wife, but I want to go home.
Yeah. Oh my
So,
God.
like, the only like real role she plays after that is she does do as she says. She sends him on his way. She like shows up here and there to like, oh, here's a saw, here's some fabric so you can build out the sail. But like that little capsule is what we have of her from the Odyssey. Really quickly from other source material, later source material, some claim that there were children born of their like their time together. We'll just put it that way. In some versions, it's two daughters. In one version, it's a son. There's a version where the son is Latinus, who is a like predecessor of Rome, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's kind of up in the air of that part because the little snippets you can find if you look at Theoi are like 3 sentences max after you get past Homer. One more, Hyginus, he claims that Calypso was so distraught when Odysseus left that she killed herself. So like, and that's basically where source material ends, you know? That's what we know of her, and what we know of her isn't looking so great, in my opinion.
No, it's gonna be really, really fun for me to take those parts and like clip them together with when we're reading like the Calypso chapter in Bell the Labyrinth, because there's a lot of similarities to how those things transpire. So that'll be fun for me to do. It would be really fun. I'll have the time of my life doing that because it'll be really like justifying, I guess is the right word to put it. But either way, like I feel like the stories with her having children with Odysseus was like men trying to find like some way to make that story not so bad for men. Mm-hmm. Of like, oh well, at least like some kids came out of this situation, so maybe it's okay. And it feels like sometimes with stories like this, people do that where they like try to like retcon basically like, oh maybe it wasn't that bad because they like created children out of magical sexual assault. Like that's not a good thing. but that's not helpful. That doesn't make it any better. But I can see how people would see this sort of story and like either want to be more empathetic to Calypso as like a woman and but it also always feels like weirdly misogynistic to me for them to be like, oh, Calypso can't have possibly been like, you know, villainous or abusive or anything because women just like cook and clean all day. They can't possibly like have those sort of thoughts or ideas or like intelligence level to do things like that to men. So there has to be something good that came out of this because she couldn't possibly have tricked Odysseus that bad. He must have wanted to like be there for part of it. Well, that's what it feels like to me when people do that kind of stuff with stories of like victim blaming and also downplaying the abuser at the same time.
How he responds to the manipulation, like saying, "Oh, you're super hot, hotter than Penelope. I'll admit it." Like I'm not even convinced that that's him. You know,
Oh,
I'm just convinced that's the lip service because we do know of Odysseus that he is a very pious man, that he knows how to treat the gods. You don't tell a goddess, no, my wife's hotter than you. Like,
yeah,
that's not
and
going to end well.
we were not allowed to talk about the songs in Epic, but I will say that the second song, the I'm Not Sorry for Loving You song, which is the one that I heard first, actually, weirdly, I heard the second song first, but um, in that song, when they get to like the end of the song and he says like I love you, but I don't love you the way that you want me to, I feel like that's Jorge, like young in his early 20s dude, like seeing that line or the this story of Calypso and being like, "Oh, see, it's not that bad." Because he says that you are attractive and you are beautiful. I just love your wife more. And it's like, did you know that when somebody's abusing you, you lie to them? You lie to their face every single day so that they don't hurt you.
Yeah.
Like, you lie constantly. That's part of why when you do, like, one thing at least I know I did when I was growing up, much to just like a couple years ago, but especially when I was like not 18 yet, is that people, even in my 20s, people would ask me things and I would just lie. And I would be like, why am I lying right now? Like, I don't know why I'm saying that. And it usually was like a response to like fear. Like somebody would ask, like a boss or something at work would ask me about something, and I would just say that I did it when I hadn't because I was afraid of what they would say if I told them that I hadn't done it yet, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And it was like I was lying because that's the way that I learned how to like stay safe with my dad, of just like lying to him. And so it's like, yeah, of course he said that because he doesn't want to die. Like, yeah, you lie. You lie to them if it means they'll let you leave. Like, this is literally a trope in like horror movies that when you want to get away from like the villain and you've convinced them that you're like a, especially in like horror movies where you convince like the killer to see you as I feel like the archetype for like teen like horror movies is Scream, which is, I love that movie so much. And like at the big part of Scream is when Sydney is talking about her dad and how much she loves her dad and how much her dad means to her, and because her mom isn't around anymore, and things like that. And that's what makes the killers like look at her in a more empathetic light long enough for her to like kill them for good so that they never come back, because she like uses that so that they start to like argue about letting her go. That's that's literally what he's doing. It's just that he's a guy. It's just that he's a guy doing it instead of like a girl that's using like her feminine wiles to like get like a scary man to like do what they want. It's just that it's a guy doing it. And so
Yeah.
instead he's like, yeah, my wife is hot, but you're hotter. That's like the guy version of that. It doesn't mean that he actually believes that. Of course he doesn't. He just wants to leave. And that's part of why that line in Epic, I was like, oh, you don't get this at all,
Yeah.
bro.
Like I do think there's people that like they want to see because it's City Sacker Odysseus. It is Slayer of Troy Odysseus. He's the one who blinded the Cyclops. You know, you could say all those chaos things like, oh, he's big powerful man, but we open the Odyssey to him crying on the beach. You know, I feel like men are very uncomfortable with that. And so they got to make him not a victim. They have to make him mutually attracted to Calypso, which I won't deny. Maybe there was some of that initially. You know, maybe he came, he's like, this is a beautiful place. Look at this beautiful woman. Sure, I'll sleep with you. But, you know, you get a year down the line, 2 years down the line, he's still there. She's still forcing him in bed every night. Like, yeah, he's broken. You know, the dude, who knows what she's been doing to him this entire time, what she's been threatening, how she's been like manipulating him throughout the day. All we know is that there's no other people there. And there is no way for him to try to escape on his own because, yes, they're surrounded by trees that he eventually builds a raft with, but he has no tools. She's hiding the tools.
Yeah, and he also doesn't really even know where he is. So it's
Exactly.
like, how do you know where to even go once you do leave? It's like that sort of a thing of like how it happens in real life of like I can't just up and leave. I have to like have a plan for when I do leave so that I'm safe once I do leave and I don't end up just like coming
Yeah,
back here. And so you can't just like leave like that. You have to actually have some kind of idea what the hell you're doing. And he
exactly.
doesn't. And I do think that a lot of the times when there's stories about, especially people like Odysseus, that's like he had sex with all these women. I'm like, I get it. You're a man and you feel weird about this. Can we calm down about all the sex they're having? They
Mhm.
probably didn't have that much sex. They were busy trying not to die. They like, can we calm down about that? It just feels like the way that people talk about, like, James Bond type characters now. It's this literally is the exact same thing.
Yeah,
That because he's like sad and crying about his wife, he gets like sexually abused by this woman. He gets like whatever happens with like Cersei and stuff too. And because he's like showing his emotions, they're like he has to be like he's this amazing bachelor even though he's married, and every woman loves him because that's the only way for him to be like this great hero that has a lot of respect.
stupid. Like, and honestly, one of the more admirable qualities about him is that he is the most monogamous person in, like these stories, at least on the Greek side. Hector, of course, beats him, but like, he's the most monogamous in these stories because, yes, he does sleep with other women, but it's not by choice, it's usually by coercion.
Hmm.
And he, like, when he takes a war bride from Troy, he doesn't take like one of the young ones, he takes the queen, you know? I don't think he was taking her to sleep with her. Like, I really don't, you know? No offense to Hecuba, or yeah, Hecuba. But it's just, like, it is an admirable quality to have him actually hurt by this thing happening. Like,
Hmm.
I, of course, you never wish it on somebody, but if you look at it through that lens instead of the lens of, oh, he just messed around with a goddess for a few years and had no way to get home, like, where's the character in that?
I don't know. There
I will
isn't.
never get why men choose the macho heroes that, like, sexual prowess is kind of all they have going for them. Like, so this is a very Star Trek conversation, but a lot of men will say Captain Kirk is their favorite, and that's because Captain Kirk is the one that got all the bitches. He's the
Hmm.
one
Hmm.
who he would go out into a planet and go kiss the green women. So people loved him. They ate him up. That's a lot of, especially boomer men's favorite Star Trek captain. Whereas, I like Picard because Picard's the philosopher of them. Picard's the one who cares about the moral compass of what's happening with the like Starfleet in general. So yeah, like, anyways, that all saying, like, it erases his moral compass to not have Calypso be somewhat of a bad guy, to not have her be somebody who is able to conquer him, because he's not somebody who can be conquered through like arms. We've seen that. He literally just escaped a war. He can fight his way out of things. But when it comes to somebody manipulating him, like that's his actual kryptonite.
Hmm.
Especially someone out manipulating him, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I wanted this to kind of serve as our intro before we go into Calypso and Percy Jackson because Rick does add a lot to her, and that is not good or bad. It is neutral as far as I'm concerned, just as a concept to add to these mythologies. Like, I mean, we look at source material and they retcon their own source material, you know? So there's no rules in my opinion. I don't mind that he adds that she's trapped on this island as a curse because she's Atlas's daughter, or that she's also cursed to fall in love with the heroes that she saves. It somewhat makes sense. I can see where he's getting that from. But what I think he's really trying to highlight with her story is these, like, the themes of manipulation, of like holding somebody with manipulation specifically.
Yeah, that's what he's going for overall in this book is just a bunch of people all being manipulated
Mhm.
over and over again.
Yeah. So we
Like
can get to the book.
especially in this book that's a like a clear theme. Like I remember seeing something once that Rick said where he felt bad for Calypso, and so he like the thing that he felt bad about was that he like was nice enough to her where she like got off of her island in his version of the story,
Mhm.
but like she's still depicted as like the person that she is in the original myths. She manipulates everybody around her to achieve that goal. It's just that he like has a story arc set up for her, and especially like Leo, for those characters to go through an arc about how she ends up getting off of her island.
Mhm.
It's just that he allows her to get off of it, but she's still the same person. It's not like she's like a better person just because he lets her do that in like the overall part of the story.
Well, this was a good transition to these chapters
Hmm.
and manipulation. So we started on chapter 3 today, which is we play tag with scorpions. Kind of one of Rick's more formulaic things about these books is we always have monster attack, return to camp, and then some sort of contest or event.
Hmm.
This time, the contest being, Quintus calls it war games, but he sends out a bunch of monsters with these silk thingies tied to their backs.
Yeah, and he's just being weird.
It's weird, yeah. So some things that we have going on when we open with a meal, and Grover comes over to the table. He's still freaking out about the council that he just went through. Um, and Chiron's basically hinting to Percy, let's convince him to go through the labyrinth.
One thing with this part that I think is funny about that's just kind of like a interesting character point that has nothing to do with like convincing Grover is how Percy is like so nervous about Annabeth breaking one of the rules,
Mhm.
like one of the camp rules. And
Yes.
like he doesn't care about like the gods rules because he's like obviously they're stupid. And
No,
so
he's just like, he's not
I
gonna be
don't
able to go back to camp.
yeah, I don't respect those rules, but like he respects the more like human-ish sort of rules about like I am in this place where there's people in authority, and like especially after like his life of like gay, but especially with schools, the
Mhm.
thing that scares him the most is when she's like breaking a rule like basically at their school and is like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do? Am I gonna get in trouble? What's gonna happen? What is she doing? Why is she here? This is really cool that she's here, but why is she doing this? Is somebody gonna hurt me?" But like when he's like yelling at Zeus, he's like, "Whatever." I'm like the same sort of way because it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna follow rules like that when I know that it's like to my like social survival because
Mhm.
I've seen like what happens when I don't follow those certain kind of rules. But when it's a situation like with abusive people, I'm like, why would I listen to you again? I'm not going
Yeah.
to listen to your rules. You're an idiot. But I have to listen to these other rules because otherwise I don't have anywhere to live.
Yeah.
I just
So
thought that was funny.
yeah, so Annabeth joins them at the table. We find out it is a rule. You have to stay at your assigned table. Like you're not
Yeah.
allowed to eat anywhere else, which like I guess we did know that because Percy talks about being forced to eat by himself. But yeah. So Annabeth comes over. Percy's internally freaking out, like, okay, well, Mr. D isn't here. Quintus seems kind of cool. I think we're okay. Chiron's not here to see us. And so Annabeth starts talking about the labyrinth. She lets them know Clarice actually went on a mission over there because Chris Rodriguez was found in there. He was found like or at an exit of one in Arizona near her mom's house. And so Clarice was dispatched to go find him and then go into the labyrinth.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a lot. And we see like later how much that is. But one thing that's hard with like these chapters is that like it is a thing that I remember experiencing in life that people just kind of like expect Percy to know about things, but they don't actually ever tell him this stuff. And so like when he's asking about like what do you mean when they're talking about Chris Rodriguez, but he doesn't know who they mean, and like Clarice gets all like protective and upset and things like that, and it's like I feel like all these people have like assumed that the other person has told him what's going on, but nobody actually has. And so then he's just left sitting there like, am I just supposed to know what's happening? I'm just going to try to like figure it out by how people respond to what I say, I guess. And that's pretty much what he's doing.
Yes.
Um, And either way, like the whole story of like Grover having to go underground, that's obviously something that a satyr wouldn't like doing very much. It's
Mhm.
something like out of like his norm, but it's clearly what he's supposed to do. It's really like the only thing that he can do to try to find Pan in such a short amount of time before, before anything, before they decide that he can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
But it is that like part this that part of the storyline of these early chapters. I was like, can we like stop talking about how Grover is like afraid to go underground because this is annoying at this point? Because there's like uh reading these chapters, I was just like, when I got to like especially the end of like chapter 5, I'm like, this is so serious. Like this is so like dangerous and generally like kind of scary, like
Yeah.
what's going on. And so the fact that his like, his whole thing is like him and his girlfriend are like worried about what will happen to him when he goes underground, I was like, can we relax? Like in like the grand scheme of things, this is not that big of a deal. I understand that it's like against your who you are as a thing to like go somewhere there's nothing alive anymore,
Yeah.
but considering what's happening, this is like the least of their problems, honestly.
Seriously.
It really is.
And it resolves so like quickly too that it's like, why did we spend so much time on this?
Trying to
But
give Grover like a storyline of his own and his own girlfriend and stuff like that. One
yeah.
thing I think is funny reading these chapters is that it's very obvious that he was using the girlfriend as like a mole, like to make you think that she was the mole when
Mhm.
when we know it's not her. But I remember one of the other big like Percy Jackson podcasts thought that it was her, and rereading these chapters, I was like, oh, I see why people thought that it was her. I was convinced that it was Annabeth, so that's what I thought was happening. So I didn't think that it was Juniper.
Yeah.
But I see why she was like the obvious choice to think that it was her, which meant that it wasn't her. Because it's not going to be the person you think it is.
Exactly. So, let's see. After that, there's a very quick like meeting with Blackjack that like I'm sure has a place. Like, there's a reason it's here. It's just not clear yet. That where he's like talking to Blackjack and he's telling him, "Looks like my next mission's going to be underground, buddy. Like, I'm sorry. I'll call on you if we end up going in the sky."
Mhm.
Um, then we jump forward to the war games. So yeah, as I said, they're supposed to collect its gold laurels that are wrapped in a silk package tied to the back of a monster, and everybody's teamed up in teams of two for this exercise. And everybody gets excited and starts trying to choose their teams. But then we find out Quintus assigned them. And he went all out with these assignments. Like, he definitely is picking on people with these assignments.
Mhm.
So I know that there's something with this later that I don't know about now, but Beckendorf is with Selena. And then we have the Stoll brothers together because that's just obvious.
Mhm.
Um, Clarice and Lee Fletcher, I don't remember much about Lee yet.
He's just a good person. That's all you need to know about him.
Okay, and then Annabeth and Percy, Rover and Tyson was the one where I was like, oh, you're really trying to start some shit. Because they just talked about being afraid of each other. Well, no, Grover didn't talk about it. Percy mentions that with the empathy link, he can feel that they're afraid of each other. Like, that
Yeah.
Grover's also afraid of Tyson.
One thing I think is like really cute about Percy and them is that Tyson and Grover are like these like super empathetic characters that like cry because a flower is pretty, and they're like his closest friends. That's
Yeah.
just adorable.
Best friend types. We've been talking about this week in our DMs that, like, you can totally have a best friend type. For some reason, I choose people with Saturnian placements or scapegoats, usually.
Hmm. And I pick people with Saturn placements too, just slightly different than mine.
Yeah.
That's just funny. But yeah, that's just like it's very sweet that that's his like personality type that he likes is like the super empathetic, kind person. It reminds me of like how I am with people where it's like, "Oh, you're like a really nice person. I'll stab somebody for you. Just ask me."
Exactly. Oh my god.
Um,
So, let's see. they start complaining. Quintus says no complaining, and then they get on. So, I'm trying to think if we. The next part I think we could talk about is as Annabeth and Percy are journeying out, they stop at was it Zeus's Fist, the place where they lost Nico, and where they where they finally decide to stop looking on that first day. And Percy thinks like I haven't been this far since that day, and he's kind of questioning his choice at this point. Like, was it really the right decision to not let them know that Nico was a Hades child? And the reason I think this might be worth discussing is, would they have treated him well had they known? Like, they would have been looking for him, but would it be like a begrudging looking for him? Like, would they automatically assume he's going to be like a not good person? Like, I know Hades isn't equivalent of the devil. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say here. But Hades is very much othered by the other gods still, and so would he be othered because of who his dad is? His dad doesn't live on Olympus.
Yeah, and it is something that we'll talk about later on when the Nico stuff happens at the end of chapter 5, but it is that thing of like he did what he thought was the right move at the time, but now he's like, well, now similar to like the stuff when you talk about with like Selena, like it's gone too far now. Where like I can't go back about this choice that I made, but like I'm not sure that I made the right one, and it's like you're 14.
Yeah.
Like you did what you thought was the best thing. You're trying to protect this kid. And because there really is no guarantee that they would have been nice to him. Because they do think that he's kind of weird overall in the books because his powers have to do with dead people.
And I would argue for Percy, like, that he did do the right thing, because had they known, it would have gotten out, it would have gotten to Luke. Luke could have potentially gotten to him first a little bit quicker. Luke people not knowing and it still being a secret from Luke is preferable to people knowing and Luke knowing.
Yeah, that's always the thing, is like he has to think about that. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to protect Nico from Luke, so Luke will just come after me instead. And we won't tell anybody who Nico is. Even if Nico comes after me, whatever, I'll just deal with it. Like, that's honestly the best way to deal with that situation. Is just, I'll do what I can to protect this kid from the people that want to come after him. Even if he hates me, I'm still going to do that because he still is a kid and deserves to be safe. And this is the only way to keep them safe, is by having everybody be ignorant, basically, about who he is. And so this next part I remember is when all of the scorpions start attacking them.
Well, they have the conversation with Juniper first, where she's like saying, "Don't let Grover go underground. I'm really scared." You know, like, what was the other thing? Oh, that doesn't happen until later. I was gonna say she lets them know about the entrance, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
this part. She's just crying about not wanting him to go underground.
And it's like, can we chill?
Yeah.
Basically. Honestly, I think a lot of that stuff is just that Percy is like an outsider with these people. Like Annabeth knows about Juniper, Annabeth knows her, knows about what's going on with Grover and Clarice and Chris Rodriguez and everyone else, but like he doesn't know, and so he's hearing about this. He's just kind of like there. It's like that time when you're like with a friend and then they run into somebody that you know and you're just kind of awkwardly standing there because you don't know them and you don't know who they're even talking about or the people that they're mentioning, and you're just kind of like waiting for it to be over, except he does know these people. But he's still in that sort of like awkward place where he doesn't really know what any of them are really talking about because they never told him. So he's just like, anyway, basically that's what he's doing.
I do find Juniper very, very adorable, though. Like, some of the dialogue that's attributed to her, like, I'm scared he was looking at another tree. He really liked this one blueberry bush. You know, it's really cute. It's really, really adorable.
She is really cute. Her and Grover are cute. And so, yeah, I think during this part, first off, when they get attacked by all three of them at once, of course, you're automatically like, hey, little bitch. That's Quentin. Quintus, like, what are you doing? Where all of your monsters are attacking
Like one.
them at the same time, like, and Percy and Annabeth at the same time. Like, there was only supposed to be one, and then they accidentally like fall into the labyrinth, and it just shows I this part just kind of sets up the precedent that the labyrinth is very like mysterious. Like, you don't know that it's there until you're suddenly in it. It's
Mhm.
really confusing, it's really big, it's hard to like see where you're going or what you're doing. And also, like, time moves very differently in there, where like they think they're only in there for like 5 minutes. They basically like Annabeth sees the things on the wall that
Mhm.
makes her realize that they're in the labyrinth, and then they get out,
Yeah.
and they think it's been like 5 minutes, and everybody is like, you've been gone for like an hour, we are looking everywhere for you, and they're like,
Yeah,
you were in
clearly
there for like
that's
three
one.
minutes Like, what do you mean? And the other part of this is that there's like this whole thing where people are like trying to insinuate that they like ran off to like kiss or something,
Mhm.
and that is just so weird. But because of where they are in like the story, that's weird. And this made me think about this like phenomenon that happens with Annabeth in this book with him, is that I like didn't explain the way I wanted to in our last episode, which is that like when you're going through like an abusive sort of situation, you're kind of like partly aware that like this is like not great, that like things are happening in your life that you don't like. And so you kind of have like people that are almost like placeholder people. Like, they're kind of like hopeful people to you that like this is horrible and this probably won't work out right, but but no matter what happens, I'll have this person like
Yeah.
waiting for me, and they'll always be kind of there because I can just like, because I know that they're not going to leave, they're not going to do anything different, they're not going to change, because I've decided they won't. And one of the things that's hard when you're going through those things is that like those people are people, and you can't just like expect them to be there and like wait for you all the time to like figure things out, because they have to live their life too. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of the stuff of how Annabeth feels about Percy, especially in these beginning parts, is she's like, she always thought, I think she sees Percy as somebody that she always thought like, oh, he's obviously somebody that's gonna like be with me or something one day. And I don't have to worry about anyone else like quote unquote stealing him away or
Mhm.
anything like that. And so I can do these like ridiculous things with trying to defend Luke and all of this stuff, because I know that Percy will always like be there no matter what I do. And then so then when he makes friends with like people like Rachel, she sees that as like such a horrible thing, because it's like, wait, but you're supposed to just like sit here in this like static form and not change, so that when I finally figure myself out, I can come back and like find you and we can just continue on like normal. Like, that's not how life works. Like, when you're in these situations, you're hurting the people around you. They feel hurt by you. They make decisions based on what's happening. And so I think it's interesting, like, how the difference between what she must be talking about him like when she's at camp versus how she actually talks to him.
Mhm.
It's so different, because like even when they're explaining to him what the labyrinth is, he's like feeling all like proud of himself at first, because he's like, oh, I think I figured out what the labyrinth is. It has to be like underground, some city somewhere in the US, right? Because that's how all this stuff works. And she's like, no, idiot, like the labyrinth is way too big to ever be there, it's everywhere. And it's like, oh, like he thought he was like feeling actually like he was smart, and he never thinks that he's smart, even
Mhm.
though he is. And she immediately was like, no, like, she even, I'm pretty sure she even actually calls him an idiot during that part. And so it's like you're like resentful of the fact that you want to believe that like you're making like a total complete mess of your life. Like, you can't be involved with an abusive person without your life becoming a complete disaster pile. And so everyone has like those people like that you just kind of like want them to just like stay exactly how they are and never change. And it's the most upsetting when those people do, because it makes you like realize like, what am I doing? Like, I'm messing everything up. And like she's not at that point yet, so she's just like mad. at Percy for like not just like staying exactly how he is when he was like 13. Like he has to like change. He's living his life too. And so it's just interesting that like Camp thinks that they're out in the woods like kissing for an hour when most of the time when they're talking to each other are just things that like is not a nice experience for them at this point of their life. And so it's like that's very much not happening. And so it's like what is she saying when he's not there? And like it's just more like the way of like the difference of what she tells other people versus like how she is actually treating him is so different. But that is a response to all of this stuff. And it's just always the reminder that everything that happens with them and how complex everything gets is Luke's fault. Just never forget that. That it's like her reaction to somebody like that, trying to use the fact that she cares about him against her, and it's making her react this way. That's why this is happening. But I thought that was interesting, just to see like how different people see them at this point in the story, that's not really what they're thinking about. Like they obviously care about each other, but they're in a very weird like place right now because of all of these like big things that are happening around them.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I totally didn't catch that everybody thought they were kissing. I don't,
Yeah.
maybe I was too busy reading it, but like, like reading it out loud since I read it out loud for this one. But yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, so they get out, they find out time has been distorted, that they feel like they've only been in there a few minutes. Um, at this point, Clarice has already won the contest, but she doesn't look happy about it. Tyson and Grover were freaking out, and like it seemed like they actually got along to look for them together. It was kind of cute. And that's how we close out this chapter, pretty much. Just they find out that entrance exists.
Yep. And then they have like the big meeting the next day, um, where they talk about the labyrinth and what it is, and the thing, the
Wait,
main.
so the next thing is the dream, though.
Oh, which one?
The dream of the old man and his son, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's very clearly supposed to be Daedalus. Like, and King Minos, I believe. And King Minos is basically saying, "You turned my daughter against me, so um, if you mess up again, you're gonna have to live here. You know, like your son. I'm gonna punish your son instead of you." And Daedalus is basically like, "I need to find a way out." And a lot of us are familiar. Like, if anyone's familiar with any Greek mythology story, it's probably Icarus, right? Icarus is it's used time and time again because it's one of those ones that it's like the tradition that was carried on by Grimm, where it's a lesson for children of listen to your parents. That's why the story gets used time and again. So Icarus and Daedalus escape the labyrinth because Daedalus fashioned these wings, but the wings were mostly made of wax. And so he tells him, if you fly too close to the sun, those wings are going to melt. And I believe the water was like freezing cold or something like that. And like you could freeze yourself if you go too close to the water. You have to stay just level. And of course he doesn't. He goes too close to the sun and he dies. So yeah, it's used very much as a like, listen to your parents or else you'll die.
That's a little extreme. But either way, it's a story of like, I always took that as a story about like when people don't like think things through, like they're thinking too impulsively, that he just like likes the idea of like flying higher because it's exciting and then like loses track of where he is until it's too late, and
Yeah.
to like try to be like aware, more like self-aware of what's going on around you so you don't end up doing something, the metaphorical version of that. Like I have seen at least 500 fan fictions titled something about Icarus. And that's always like the general theme of those stories, no matter what fandom it is.
Yeah.
And so that's
Well,
how I always saw it anyway.
I'm wondering, it probably was Ovid's version that I'm remembering. I don't remember which version it was from, but like that part of the myth is that like that feeling of freedom as he's flying over this. Like, imagine that would feel so freaking cool. Of course,
Hmm.
you're gonna lose yourself,
Especially
especially
after being stuck in the labyrinth.
yes.
Like you're
So
finally free, you're excited, and you should be able to be happy without crashing to your death, like right afterwards, basically, of like trying to like balance that
yeah,
feeling of like freedom, but not like going too far where you like lose sight of the ground, sort of thing. That's like, I don't know, that's how my literary brain at least always saw that general story. But either way, Percy is dreaming about that,
yeah.
um, and is like, okay, that's Daedalus. He looks like he's about to fall over dead, but that's interesting. That then during like the meeting they have, they're talking about how he might still be alive
Mhm.
in the labyrinth, and he's like, how the hell is that old man still alive thousands of years later? But it this like sort of these chapters are ones that like when you think about like the other like especially like the earlier books, the like
Mhm.
quests that they were going on were so like straight kind of like straightforward. Even in like Sea of Monsters when like the camp is getting attacked, it's like okay, we need to go to like get to where the golden fleece is so that we can bring it back and save everybody at camp so everyone doesn't die. So they know like their general like quest is to get to the golden fleece, but this one is like you have to get into the labyrinth. You have to find a way to get through the labyrinth. You have to also maybe find Pan. You have to like also not only find Daedalus, but you have to like find the string, and then you have to find not only have to find him, you have to find him before Luke finds him. You have to find him before like they can build like a basically like a body for like Kronos. You have to find him before like Nico maybe finds him. You have to find him before like all these other people that are
Yes.
all looking for him at the same time. And it's like there's like 14 different things that they're all trying to do all at once. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, how are they going to do all of these things at the same time? And so it's like you have to find somebody in an impossible maze before other people might find him and do it first. And they have no idea where he even is. And especially the thing that is like that I wanted to make a note of to just like make the obvious point about like this general plan is that there's an entire part in this chapter where they are literally sitting there being like, should we have children guard the entrance to this labyrinth in case Luke comes in and tries to kill us all?
Mhm.
Because if Luke and his army show up to kill us all through this entry, if Luke is able to figure out how to get out of the labyrinth before we can stop him, he's going to kill everybody at camp. And there's no way that he won't. It's like guaranteed that he would overrun us because he is an entire army and we are a bunch of children. And so they're sitting there having to like guard the entrance of the labyrinth from Luke
Mhm.
and having to guard it, like be on alert all the time, knowing that he might show up at any moment to kill them all. And that if he does, there's nothing that they can do to stop him from doing that.
Yeah.
And they're all sitting there like talking about it, like it's in this meeting that like Juniper mentions that she saw Luke around.
Mhm.
um
Around the entrance.
yeah, and like the note that I wanted to make because I was talking about the trafficking stuff earlier is that like she mentions that she noticed that it was him because she thought he was cute.
Mhm.
And so it's like he always used that somehow towards his advantage in some way because he knew that people thought that about him. And so she notices him because he is that, but she also didn't tell anybody about what he was doing because of that.
Yeah, she was like, he can't be doing anything that bad. I mean, he's cute.
Yeah, like he's really cute. So like obviously he's just like lurking around this part of the forest really far into camp by himself and finding like the labyrinth entrance for some other good reason. And it's just like he uses all of that stuff to like so that people don't realize what he's really doing until it's way too late. Um and either way this whole situation is just there's just like so many things going on and they haven't even left yet. But there's just already it's just so much like pressure and like this is like Annabeth's quest. They decide that she's obviously the one that should do it and like one part from this meeting thing that I wanted to make sure to mention was when Percy and Annabeth have their little argument where like she's saying like I've been reading books about Daedalus since I was a kid. That's gonna be enough for us to figure it out. And he's like, no, it isn't. And like, yeah, it's absolutely not. Like, and but it's that like coping mechanism of hers that like anyone would be hearing this feeling overwhelmed. Like
Yeah.
Luke is going to show up at camp and kill everybody if we don't figure this out. This is my quest. I have to make sure that we figure this out. This is my responsibility. And the only way that she knows how to cope with that is by like just convincing herself that if she reads enough books that she'll be able to somehow know all the answers and figure everything out herself. And it's like that's not how, no, you can't do that. Like
Well,
you
and
can
when they're
you can
talking about this entrance that they just found, she's like, "Well, Luke must have known. He knew everything about camp." And Percy remarked there was pride in her voice as she said that.
yes.
So
That's
she's
like
having to do this, still very much feeling like, "Well, my Luke is in there."
yeah. She's still like thinking about him like that. And especially when they're talking about like how they tried to blow up the entrance when they found Chris Rodriguez and it just didn't work, and so they can't do that. And so it just this entire meeting they're going through all these different contingency plans because they're like if Luke gets into camp he's going to kill everybody and we're not going to be able to stop him. And it's just like a very like scary thing to imagine that they're all sitting there knowing that that's happening and they're just trying to figure out enough of a plan so that to hopefully stop him before he actually does that. Because if he does that, a bunch of kids, like little kids, are going to die. And there's nothing that they can do to make that not happen. And it's like that's his plan, obviously. Like, why else? And it's just like scary that the labyrinth is like in the middle of camp. And so there's nothing that they can do to like protect them necessarily in the same kind of way. And in the middle of that, she's still like thinking about him as like how she used to see him. It's still somehow still like that.
Yeah.
That's just frustrating. And it's just like, oh God, this is why I used to think that she was the mole. Because the part of this like whole thing is that they do this meeting and they all agree that this is Annabeth's quest. Like she's all about Daedalus and everything. And even though Percy is right that like reading books is not going to be the thing that's going to solve everything, that's never like you when you actually start doing things it never goes the way that it's supposed to, quote unquote supposed to, in that sort of a way. You have to like actually, I'm like that person that like reading something just doesn't work for me. I have to like actually do it in order to really like understand how. And so it's that sort of kind of a thing that like she can't read books forever and expect to be able to just like know how to get through the freaking labyrinth without something else happening at some point or getting help from someone else or something or other. And so either way they leave and she goes to talk to the Oracle.
Yeah, and it starts taking a long time. So Percy decides to go up to the big house, even though he doesn't really want to. He's had nothing but negative experiences with the Oracle so far.
Yeah.
And when he gets in there, he sees Clarice nursing basically Chris Rodriguez.
Yeah. And Jesus. And just that whole situation is just so awful that that somebody like that could be like discarded by Luke in that sort of a way. And it is one of those things that because Clarice thinks that he's hallucinating, she doesn't notice that he's there. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, please don't start screaming at him right now. That would be bad for everybody involved. Like, Chris Rodriguez would get upset. He would get upset. She would get, let's skip that. And so I was glad that he at least found a way to find out what was going on with Chris, since nobody wanted to really tell him necessarily what was happening. But either way, that situation is like very serious, and you understand like, and it makes the labyrinth really scary, knowing that they're about to go into it, knowing that happened to him, and being like, what's gonna happen to us? Yeah, and So
Yeah, so a
I'm
couple.
laughing because I'm remembering how he comes back, and that's when Annabeth comes back, and I'm laughing because she starts saying the prophecy, but she like doesn't say part of the prophecy because she doesn't want to say what it is, and I know what that says. They pretty much make it pretty clear, like Percy's not an idiot. He figures out what it says likely. Um, but it's just funny that I just like pictured in my mind when Chiron was like, "What about the line that you skipped?" And she's like, "Oh, I forgot what they said." And he just looks at her like, "Do
Yeah,
you expect me to believe that? Like that you like forgot a line? Like you're Annabeth. Like
yeah,
of
well,
course you didn't. You just don't want to tell me whatever it is." And overall, the thing to take out of this part is that every quest is supposed to be 3 people, but she's like, I need 4. She wants to bring Tyson and Percy and Grover on the quest with her, and that is breaking like one of their big rules. And it's like that's obviously like a ominous sort of thing to break, but she's just gonna do it anyway. And it does have to do with like that line of like how these things in this book kind of transpire when it
yeah,
comes to that of like what happens to all of them and things like that. But it does just it kind of shows like kind of how like desperate in a way they are to like find a way to stop this from happening, from stopping Luke from killing all of them. That like they're willing, she is willing, like Annabeth is willing to like break rules like this and
mhm,
just go with it because it's like, well, I if we're gonna go in here, I need all of these people with me, and so even if it is against the rules, we're just gonna do it anyway because if we don't have everybody
yeah.
here, we're probably all gonna die anyway.
Yeah, like, and so you get the sense Percy's for companionship. Tyson is because he's going to be very useful if they need some, like, mechanical or technical help. And Grover because they have this feeling that Pan is a part of, like, this, what's going to happen here. And so one thing, I kind of need to read the prophecy, like, all together because I don't like that it's broken up. It definitely broke up my understanding of it. But we have you shall delve in the darkness of the endless maze, the dead, the traitor, the lost one raise. You shall rise or fall by the ghost king's hand, the child of Athena's final stand. And then there's the like, what about the lines you missed? And she said something about destroy with the hero's final breath. So we know that there's a couplet, like one of the lines in the couplet that's missing. And eventually, as you said, Percy guesses breath rhymes with death. And he's like, so is there a line about death that you didn't say?
Yeah. And I do like the part when she goes back to the Athena cabin and Percy's like, I've never actually been in here before, which is funny. It's not like they spend all that much time, or he does anyway. I camp in that sort of a way, I suppose. But he goes in there to try to like comfort her at least a little bit, and he does end up like doing it when all of a sudden she's just like really upset and is trying to help her like relax and be like, no matter what happens, we'll figure out something,
Mm-hmm.
like we always somehow do. And it's just this is like stuff that I like imagine them doing it on the show. Specifically, the part when her sibling walks in and finds them, and he's like, Chiron came to get you so that you can go to archery practice, and Percy being like, we're just looking at maps.
Oh my gosh, like I said something you'll probably see it in the recording. I was like, you're so clueless, boy. Like you don't realize how down bad you are right now.
Like
Okay.
that's just like picturing like Walker saying that line is
No,
like
it's
so
and
funny.
I know
So
we
funny.
talked about how like Percy is so clueless to the fact of how he even feels about Annabeth because he is in this fight or flight the entire time. But she puts out her arms and it says, "I stepped forward and hugged her. Butterflies started turning my stomach into a mosh pit." And so, like, he says that. He also makes a remark about her hair smelling like lemon, which that's something that Becky talked about, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, her hair has to smell like lemon soap. And she's like, "Is there a natural hair, like
Yeah.
something for natural hair
Yeah.
that like we can use on Leah?"
That day was really funny because she was just like obviously annoyed by life and was just like, somebody give me a shampoo that's lemon so everyone stops complaining about this.
Yeah.
Like I
So
was like,
like,
I was laughing about that a couple months
but
ago. But
yeah,
um,
it's very much giving he has feelings for her. He just doesn't realize it in that moment.
I don't even think it's that. Just as like someone who's more been him in life is, I think it's more it never once occurs to him that she would ever feel that way about him.
Yeah.
I don't think that he's not aware of how he feels about her because most of the time when you're in that sort of position, it's like, oh, I know how I feel about these people in my life, but never once did I ever think that they could ever possibly feel that way about me. So, like, why would I ever bring it up? So,
Yeah.
like, why would I ever talk about it? Because there's no way that they would feel this way about me because I'm a terrible person. And so, like, I know that I love this person or I know that I care about this person a lot, but I'm not going to say anything about it because I know that I love them more than they love me, basically, sort of thing. And so I'm sure that that's how he feels, and that's how he comes across to me anyway, is that, like, he knows how he feels about her, but he's like, but, there's always something, like, that I'm doing that's wrong somehow. And
Yeah.
so, like, why talk to her about it? Because I'm sure he's, like, very surprised when he realizes that she has any sort of feelings like that about him. Like, that's why I think later on he doesn't take it very seriously when she does kiss him, is that he's like, well, she probably did that because I was about to die. And
Mhm.
so it's like he doesn't see it as, like, what it is because he doesn't think that it's possible for people to have those feelings about him. And, like,
Yeah.
considering his life, why would he? Like, why would he? Because to, like, go into, like, the stuff that happens next, like the the Titan's Curse book is like the one that I think, including me, we remember about making it very obvious how much of a scapegoat Percy is in this world.
Mhm.
But I think part of why it stands out in that book is that there isn't like all these other like huge things necessarily happening. Like there's big things happening, but it's a big part of the plot. And so it stands out more. But those scapegoat things are still happening in this book. And it just keeps getting like worse because the stakes are like higher and higher. And like this part is kind of one where like he doesn't think that Annabeth could ever even have the capabilities of feeling that way about him. And so he just doesn't bring it up. And the next part of these chapters are like some of like the dreams and
Yes.
stuff that he has.
He missed Quintus giving him a whistle. So
Oh yeah.
he,
Oh, that part is one that I like because it shows like the effects of Luke on him.
yes.
That Quintus gives him a whistle, and of course the thing that he remembers is that Luke gave him shoes that was supposed to drag him into hell. And so Quintus is trying to help him, but he is like immediately suspicious of him being nice to him. Because the only other time that somebody was nice to him at camp, they were trying to kill him. And so it's just that thing of like how like Luke doing these things to people like affects them a lot, that like he is afraid to use something that was given to him as a gift.
Yeah,
Like
I
he
think
thinks about not bringing it on the quest with him, and he tells himself when they do go that he's never going to use it because he's so afraid of what it's going to do, because he's sure that it's a trick,
exactly, yeah.
and that it's going to somehow kill him or something because of how that went with Luke. Okay, so the next part is
The
Dear
dream.
Lord. So it's basically like back to back things where he has a dream about Luke,
Mhm.
and in the dream, Kelly is being Kelly and with him, but Kelly is like freaky just because she somehow seems to like almost see that he's there
Mhm.
and is like attacking him as he's leaving the dream. But either way, like Luke knows about their plan to go into the labyrinth. And so that makes it very obvious to everyone that like the only people that know are the people that are at the meeting. And so one of those people have to be telling him. Like we know that it's Selena, but Percy in the story doesn't know that yet. But either way, it's establishing the fact that there is like a legitimate like mole of in one of their most trusted people at camp. that is telling him what's going on, and that he's glad that they're going into the labyrinth because it's like part of his plan for them to go in there, so that whatever, so that he can do whatever he wants to them.
Yeah.
But
Some other things is like, so Luke looks better in this dream. Like, he looks like he's no longer sickly how he was at the end of Titan's Curse.
mhm.
He's dressed in all white, and something that Kronos says to him, he says, "You wanted power, I gave you that. You are now beyond harm. Soon you will rule the world of gods and mortals." But like you are now beyond harm. So I know that they're merging, or they were merging. I don't know, like, but so there's a lot of stories of immortals trying to give immortality to mortals. And so I'm thinking, like, that's also what this is supposed to be calling upon of, like, I will give you that gift that we are somehow able to bestow upon other regular people if you
Well,
do this.
it's also like a thing of like Thalia literally kicked him down a cliff, and
Yes.
he somehow survived that and looks fine. And so there's
What's
clearly
better?
something going on here that makes him harder to kill,
Mhm.
because he should have died. Like
Yes.
doing that, if he was just still his normal self, he would have died. And so there's clearly something going on there. And like the part of that interaction that I wanted to bring up is that sometimes people see that interaction and they take him like waffling, like telling like Kronos like can we wait a little bit longer and things like that as like him like regretting what he's doing and like not wanting to go along with like the plan and things like that. And I don't take it that way at all. I think that he is waffling because he knows that he is about to be like taken over by Kronos because he couldn't find somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And that is the part of the plan that he is waffling on is his part of the plan. He's trying to like put that off for longer so that he can find somebody else. He can kidnap Percy or something and make him do it so that he doesn't have to. And that's the part that he doesn't want to do. And that's why Kronos is like, do you want ultimate power or not? Like, if you couldn't find somebody else, then you're going to have to be the one to do it. And that's the part with this that Luke doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to actually put himself in like the line of fire at all. But he has to now because he couldn't find somebody else to do it for him. And so that's really the part that he doesn't want to do is that. I don't see that as him being like, I don't want to do this plan at all. It's more like I don't want to have to actually be the one to put myself on the line that way. I wanted to find somebody else so I could still be fine. But either way, it was pretty easy to convince him. All he had to do was be like, remember how you want ultimate power? And he's like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I'll stop talking now. But
Yeah.
either way,
We find Kelly. So I believe in Puzai do have like they charm people in their sleep. So I'm
okay.
guessing that's why she can see Percy.
Mhm.
And he wakes up, and then his fountain starts flashing, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit! Last time this happened, I got to peek in on Nico standing by the river Styx. What's gonna happen now?" It's not asking for like it's not a collect iris message even, so he's not sure what's going on there. It doesn't do anything, even though it's flashing, until he says, "Show me Nico."
Yeah. And just the whole thing of like waking up from a scary dream like that and then seeing like something else on and just being like, what is going on? And just being like, fine. Um, and this is like actually scary. Like I was imagining this happen on the TV show and I'm like, this is actually gonna be
It's
scary.
equally part scary and funny to me. And it's funny more so because of how Nico does it than like what happens. But yeah, like it's gonna be such a good combination to see visually, honestly. Like both terrifying and just like this little kid pouring coke into a grave.
Yeah, because he's 11.
Yes.
So how would an 11-year-old try to bring back the dead if you had powers to do it? This is the way that you would do it if they need like things to drink and like water and like food to eat. That's what you're going to offer them because you're an 11-year-old child that should be in 5th grade and
Yes.
not doing this stuff. And so either way, this scene is like very freaky because the spirit that he brings back is like trying to warn him about the other spirit that is with him. that
Yes.
is like trying to obviously control him, and he's just like demanding it to tell him like just tell me how to bring back my sister. And the guy, and like the spirit thing he bring back is trying to warn him like, I know that voice, I know that person, he's trying to trick you, you can't do this, you
And
can't
we
bring your
find out
sister
his
back.
name Theseus. Like, so Theseus,
Yeah, when they said Theseus, I was like, why him?
yeah, not the best hero, but like,
No. But
so,
even he is like, I know that guy, get away from him. So
well,
if
him
he's
saying
saying
I
that,
know
it's
that
pretty
voice,
bad.
yeah, him saying I know that voice is very pointed. I think I know who the ghost is as well. And it's like, oh, are you
Yep.
everybody? You know? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so Theseus at first is just trying to warn Nico, saying, stay away from that dude. I know that voice. He's not a great dude. And Nico's just like, I want to know about my sister. So we find out this Nico's still just, that is his number one thing. He wants Bianca back. And this is making Nico like very vulnerable for Luke. If Luke ever finds out he is a son of Hades and the one thing that he wants is his sister back, that's going to be really, really dangerous. Um, and the fact that he's going this far, so Nico, an 11-year-old, purchased multiple packs of Coke and a lot of Happy Meals, and he's dumping them into this grave. And you have to think, how much money did that kid spend? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how he carried all of that to wherever he was. Like, there's a lot about this that took so much effort. This is how much he loves and cares about Bianca, which is really sweet. But at the same time, you can't help but be scared for him knowing that like you are one fact away from Luke hunting you down.
Yeah. This scene reminded me a lot of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood,
Mhm.
um, where they're like so desperate to bring their mom back to life because their dad is the worst, um, that they end up doing what they do, and that's the entire plot of the story is Al's body going away, Ed losing two of his limbs because they are messing with things that they don't understand.
Mhm.
Um, it reminded me so much of that sort of thing of like a young kid just like desperate to bring somebody back that they love and just not thinking about the consequences or anything because they're so young, especially they don't, I don't even know if they could fully like grasp the like consequences of those sort of big decisions when you're so young. um Genuinely, I don't know if you're developmentally able to do that at when you're 11. um but it is just like this like that scene is just one that like keeps building. Like Theseus is yelling at the spirit guy,
Mhm.
Nico is yelling at them, more and more spirit, and then they start talking about like we have to leave, he's coming, they're coming, they can like sense the your like energy or your power, you have to leave, like please let us leave because this like dangerous scary thing is coming and we don't know what that is. um and so it like cuts off with like the things like the spirits around them seemingly like attacking Percy,
Mhm.
and he panics and attacks
The fountain.
the fountain and breaks it, and then sits there on the floor for the rest of the night just staring at it.
Yeah.
um
And this is
and
the night before the quest too, so not a good
yeah,
night's sleep to go off and leave to the labyrinth.
yeah, this part, like after I read these chapters, I am not exaggerating, I stared at like my bed sheets for like 2 hours because I was like, I'm not really here right now, because I was just remembering what it was like doing that kind of thing. Like I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Like I remember like in my version it was like having PTSD nightmares. That's essentially what's happening. Um and just like waking up in like like a panic attack basically from that, and just like sitting there for the rest of the night. Like that was like me every single day, and not exaggerating, like every single night in 2019 I would wake up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and would usually just like end up staying up the whole rest of the night, and like somehow not like just falling over from exhaustion at a certain point, and then would like get like 2 hours of sleep the next night, and that was just like how I lived for an entire year somehow. um and so like seeing him talk about how he just like sat there on the floor for hours not being able to like go back to bed or like do anything else. And later on I loved how when Annabeth is like, "You look terrible," and Tyson's like, he
He
broke
killed
it.
the water fountain.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
killed the water fountain, and I'm like, that's like such a sweet like Tyson way to put it. But it's just like that's such a those two things back to back is kind of like what I mean by like the scapegoatness of Percy is continuing in this book. It's just that there's also a lot of really big things happening, so it's not as obvious as Titan's Curse. Like, he is the one that is having dreams about Luke and what's going on with him, and then to follow that up with Nico, especially because it's Nico. And like he can't really tell anybody about what's going on with Nico. And in this like next part when he wakes up and when they're getting ready to like leave, he's just thinking about like I probably shouldn't have kept this a secret because now it's like becoming something that's like out of control and I don't know how to handle this. That reminds me so much of so many things that I dealt with when I was especially a teenager, that like all of these like huge things that are happening to you and you don't want to tell other people about it because you feel like it's your like he didn't tell anybody about Nico because he thought he literally says it. He thought that it was his responsibility to fix things because he thought it was his fault that Bianca died. And so he didn't tell anybody because he was like, it's my responsibility to fix this thing. And now he's realizing, like, I don't know that I can fix this. And now this, like, child is bringing back spirits and doing all of these really dangerous things. And I don't know how to stop him. And I also can't tell anybody about it because if I do, I have to tell them that I didn't tell them about this when this happened, like, 6 months ago. And so now it's too late and I can't, and like, especially the part when he is, when they get up to like go to leave on the quest, he goes to talk to Chiron, which is like his nice dad figure, which I still appreciate. But he's thinking when he's talking to him, like, I want to tell him about Nico, but I can't tell him
And so he told
because
him about the other dream. Yeah.
because it's like too much and he wants to tell him about it because talking to him about it would probably make him feel better, but he can't tell him because he feels like he would be upset with him or people would be mad at him if he did it. And it's just the overall thing of like scapegoats that like the amount of secrets you have when you're a scapegoat is astronomical. Like you are keeping secrets for like every single person around you. They like like I was keeping secrets from like every single person in my family, like my friends. There like people in my family didn't know about things that I was keeping for other people in my family. Like there's like secrets on top of layers on layers and layers and layers of secrets. And you feel like you have to do that to like protect everyone else around you and that you're supposed to be the one to carry this around with you all the time. And
Yeah.
so like I very much identified with him telling Chiron about the dream with Luke to be like he wants us to go into the labyrinth. He's trying to bring like make like a body for Kronos or something. Like Chiron figures that out. But like he has to he at least can tell Chiron about that so that they can have some sort of idea of what to expect if he does show up at camp before they come back. But it's like he tells Chiron about the stuff with Luke because he can't tell anyone else. He can't tell Annabeth. He can't tell, there's no way that he can tell anyone around her anything to do with Luke. And so he tells Chiron alone where nobody else can hear them. And so nobody else knows. I'm pretty sure in that conversation, he never tells Chiron that he knows that there's a mole. He like, that's what I mean by like layers on layers on layers of secrets, is that like even the people that you tell things to, there are things that you don't tell them about. And so like even though he told Chiron about this dream that he had about Luke going into wanting them to go into the labyrinth, the most important part is that Luke knows everything that's happening at camp, and so somebody is telling him what's going on and he doesn't tell him about that. And just like keeps that to himself because he's like he feels like he needs to like handle that himself somehow. And and can't tell anybody about the like absolutely terrifying dream with Nico. And just is like, okay, I guess we're just gonna like go into the labyrinth now. I got 2 hours of sleep last night.
Well, he unloads one more secret, and it's that Juniper had told him the other person that
Mm.
she saw near the rocks was Quintus, and so he's like, Quintus is a little sketchy, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh, and so he does unload that secret as well, but that's still way too many secrets.
Yeah. It's just, and that's just like honestly how it is that you are like holding all of these things that are completely overwhelming. And it's like, this is like the night before they're going on this very dangerous quest. And he got like no sleep whatsoever and just had PTSD nightmares and then had like basically like a PTSD flashback moment for the entire night when he was like sitting there. And now he's just like going in there and he's expected to somehow know what to do. And if he doesn't figure out what to do, all of these kids at this camp that he cares about are all going to be murdered. And so it's like, well, I have no choice but to do this. But it's just like, that's the kind of like overwhelming like choices that we end up having to do. And it's just like the amount of things. Like, I guess the thing with like scapegoat stuff is that a lot of what we do is like negotiating other people's feelings. And so, like, he's like, well, I can't tell Annabeth about this dream about Luke, so I'm going to go tell Chiron where nobody else is around. And when she comes to ask us what we're talking about, just like, don't mention it. Because if I tell her about this dream about Luke, even though people should know about it besides me and Chiron, she's going to get upset. And so I'm not going to tell her so she doesn't get upset. And I'm not going to tell Chiron about Nico because he might get upset about us not telling us. And the gods are going to get upset. And people might think that I'm not trustworthy and I'm supposed to do this prophecy. And like also, by the way, just a reminder, Thalia left him to deal with all of this.
Yeah.
Like this entire, all of these chapters, I was just like, Thalia is gone. Thalia is off somewhere being a hunter that is immortal and can't die. And he is in the middle of all of this mess where he's like, I can't tell most of these people about what Luke's doing because Annabeth will get upset at me. I can't tell like the people who I want to tell about Nico because I feel like they might get upset with me. I have to just like know that Luke is going to use this person, Daedalus, to bring back like Kronos and murder everybody. And I have to somehow keep all these secrets from everybody to keep everyone else happy while I can't sleep because I'm having so many nightmares about what everyone else is going through that I can't tell anybody about. And I'm just supposed to somehow know the answer to everything because I'm the prophecy child. And if I don't figure it out, everyone is going to die on my 16th birthday. And
Yeah.
like nobody is again asking him like, are you okay? Like, are you all right? Like, what's going on? Like, Chiron is once again like the person that is like generally asking him if he's okay. But it's like Grover is all worried about going underground. Annabeth is worried about doing her quest. Both of those things matter, but like the amount of things that he's like carrying already. And like nothing that actually happens in this book has actually happened yet. And I know some of the things that happen and it's so much already that it's just like overwhelming the amount of things that like the things that we walk around with just like knowing inside our heads and that we don't just like fall over from like the weight of it all and like how much work we do trying to make everybody else feel okay while we're like falling apart at the seams and like can't eat and can't sleep and can't do anything and are just like constantly thinking about all these things that we can't control but we are trying to do it anyway. It's just that's very accurate. Like the sort of situation is very accurate to how that feels. Because it is like that. It is very overwhelming and you just don't know what to do. And you're just like hoping that it's the thing overall with this part with Percy too is that he's not really he's not expecting somebody else to help him. Like he's just like telling people things. He's like telling Chiron like Quintus is weird and Chiron's like, yeah, I figured he was weird, so I'm just like watching him. I felt it would be better to watch him here than to like know that he was outside waiting for us. But
Yeah.
he's like reporting news, but he's not doing it in a way to be like, I need help. Because it doesn't like occur to him that anyone would actually give him any.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't ever ask for help. And so he just is dealing with all of this stuff and is just like expecting like I know it's going to come down to me.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to somehow find a way to deal with all of this without losing my mind.
Yeah, and then they drop down into the labyrinth. That's pretty much where we leave Tyson going, yay, rocks, and go into the labyrinth. So yeah, we're already set up with Percy being in so much stress, with like so much in his head as he's going into this place that we already know drives people crazy. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. And this poor kid. And so, yeah, it's, I don't know. Like,
I guess the thing to keep in mind too is like with the context of Percy and Annabeth in this book, 'cause it's such a huge storyline,
mhm,
is that like just think about somebody in this sort of a position. Do
mhm.
you think he's thinking that much about romance? No, he is not.
Really has much going
He's
on.
thinking about this stuff. He's thinking, I don't want Nico to die or do something that he will regret later. I don't want everyone at camp to die. I don't want Luke to kill everybody. I don't want to fail everyone. I don't know what's going on. That's what he's dealing with. The last thing on his mind is figuring out, even if he was aware in like a real way that it was physically possible for people to have romantic feelings for him, which he is not aware of at this point. He does not think it's possible for people to feel that way for him. That is what happens to your self-worth when you're the scapegoated role in your life. You don't think that it's possible. Like I tell her this all the time, that whenever people, even people just who know me online, or just like leave comments or like, oh, I really like your videos, or I really like this, and I'm like, are you lying to me? Like I sit there and look at it like, are you sure? Are you just like lying? And I genuinely sit there and think like maybe they're just lying to me to make me feel better. That's
Oh,
usually my response still. Um, and so like yeah, he's never going to imagine that anyone is physically capable for people to have actual real feelings. It's like they must just be confused or they don't really know me that well. And if they knew me that well, they wouldn't feel that way about me anymore. It's like that sort of an energy. And so like just try to keep that in mind with the context of everything that's going on, is that like he's carrying all of these things. He's trying to help everybody else stay calm while he's dealing with it all. And so when things transpire later on, to try to remember that instead of just being upset because he doesn't understand why Annabeth is upset at him.
yes.
It's not because he's oblivious. It's like I am too abused to even believe that you could think that you could genuinely feel this way about me. And also, I'm trying to not let have everybody die.
Yeah.
And it's literally up to him. He's the prophecy kid.
Well, we
It's
have multiple races happening here. We have the race to the center of the labyrinth, and we have a race to Nico.
it's
And
everything. It's like they have to find they have to like figure out how to get through the maze. They have to find Ariadne's string. They have to find Daedalus and figure out if he's still alive. And if he is still alive, they have to convince him not to help Luke. They have to find all of that before Luke finds him. And they also have to find a way to get out of the maze once they're in the maze so they can stop Luke from killing everybody at camp. And like that's so many things to be trying to get done all at once. Like just I just ask when people like I was going back and forth with somebody on another video that one of our kids was like tagged us in about Annabeth basically, and the person in there was saying like, oh, Percy people always like make it about him when the post is about how Annabeth feels, and it's like because you're not acknowledging any empathy for him. And like they're like, and the person I was arguing with was like, yeah, because this is about Annabeth and it's about how she feels. And it's like, yeah, but like you can acknowledge how she feels without distorting the story to make him look really bad, because that's not how she feels about him. And also like if she is feeling that way about him, that's not exactly fair and not something that you should really like talk about as if that's just how you should feel. That to like demonize a guy because they don't seem to be showing interest in you the exact moment that you want them to show interest, when you've like disregarded them in the past. It's like they're a person, they have their own like thoughts, but it's just the idea that like a lot of those posts have show like no empathy for him at all. And the aggravating thing about what that person was saying was that every person who is defending Percy in those posts have a lot of empathy for Annabeth too. It's just that there isn't like the balance of talking about both of them. A lot of those are like, Percy is a stupid boy. Percy is so confusing. Percy messes everything up. Why Percy disappears after she kisses him for the first time with another girl on an island and then is talking with another girl, and it's like You're
Oh,
talking about Calypso when you're talking about that. That's like deranged to talk about that in that sort of a way when how it actually happens. And so it's like you have so much empathy for her that you have none for him. And this is not a story like that. This is a story where you're supposed to have a lot of empathy for both of them because they're both traumatized kids going through hell because Luke did this to them. And so you should be upset that they're in this position in the first place, but you're supposed to understand how they both feel. You're not supposed to like decide one is perfect and one isn't. And so when we talk about them, we talk about Percy more because genuinely for like the last year, I've seen videos about this book and they all are talking about how Percy is like the one in the wrong, how Percy is being a bad guy, how Percy is like not noticing things and like how is he this confusing or how doesn't he know this? How I can't believe that Annabeth like Annabeth is stronger than me for dealing with all of this and things like that. And it's because it's so like one-sided that way. We have to like defend the other side because that other side usually doesn't get talked about for whatever reason. It just I see it. It just doesn't. And that's the thing to keep in mind is that like yeah, Annabeth is going through really hard times too, but so is he. And that is like the point of their story is that you're supposed to be upset that everything between them gets so messed up because of the things that they're being forced to deal with and it's not because of anything they did. It's because of what Luke did.
exactly.
That's supposed to be upset. But like if you read these stories and you decide that because Percy doesn't immediately want to date her the exact moment she wants to when she's been talking about Luke for like a long time, even though she knows that he's tried to kill him many times, you're supposed to have empathy for him.
Yeah.
And I guess that's like the thing of sometimes like the gender stuff can go like too far sometimes of people just like assuming that the guy is an idiot and doesn't know what he's doing because he's a guy and it's like this is not that sort of story. Percy is not that like stereotypical guy. That's literally the point of him. He was raised by his mother and
Yeah.
he respects women a lot and actually shows how he respects them instead of just being a guy that says he does but really doesn't. He really does. Like we talked about in Titan's Curse that he never even thought or like considered the fact that Zoe is like beautiful until the very end when he sees her with her family and sees how beautiful her family is because he respects her as like a leader. And so he just never thought to like look at her in an attractive way because he always saw her as like a leader, somebody to look up to, like somebody that knows what they're doing. And so the idea of like, you know, thinking of what they look like just never occurred to him because he respects her. And so he just like wasn't going to do that. He's not that guy that's like, oh, you're really hot when you're like bossing me around.
Yeah.
He's the opposite, where it never even occurred to him how like beautiful she actually is until he saw the rest of her family, because he didn't put her in that sort of stereotypical feminine role in his mind. The stereotypes you have for like teenage boys don't apply to this character because they're written by a man and a woman, by Becky and Rick. There are things about Percy that go with Rick, and there are things about Percy that go with Becky. You can find that out just by following Becky on Threads.
Yes.
From the things she talks about with her childhood, that alone, like where she lived when she was a kid before she moved, that alone tells you what comes from him and what comes from her. She's the one who lived in New York. Like, not him. He grew up in Texas. And so that stuff is from her. And so Percy is a mix of both of them, in the way that Annabeth is probably a mix of both of them too. They don't fit the regular gender roles because they're written by both genders.
Yeah.
And that's all I ask for people to really understand about these books, because it just makes the story much better when you're not constantly mad at Percy for things he hasn't actually done.
Exactly. And we can talk more about that. I'm guessing the Calypso stuff is next week.
No,
No, it's 2
it's
weeks.
like chapter 11/12.
Okay.
Just from that one, I saw a post where somebody was posting the chapter titles for every chapter in Battle of the Labyrinth, and so I just like scrolled through until I got to the chapter where I knew it happened, so I knew around the time when it happened. But the next few parts is going to be things involving stuff that happens in the labyrinth with everything that's going on before the stuff with that happens. Because and when they come back from Calypso stuff, things get more intense in a certain way. Um, and so they have to like kind of wander around lost for a while before they get to that point. But either way, um, that's either I remember parts of this book, but there's a bunch of it that I also don't remember that much. And so it's really fun to be rereading it again and noticing these sort of dynamics and things like that in a way that I wasn't self-aware enough when I read these for the first time.
Yeah.
To like actually notice this was I the books I reread 40 billion times was the first four, but especially Titan's Curse and Battle of the Labyrinth. I used to just like I would read one and then go back to the other one, then go back to and just go back and forth for like months at a time, reading those. And so it's fun for me to reread them again, still not remembering a lot of what happened in them because of dissociation. And so it's like generally interesting for me to try to like see the things like happen again and like see if I remember them happening the first time or like what I remember differently now, like with the stuff with like the mole and things like that. Um, I guess there was one part with like Selena where she said something to Percy. I forget what she asked him, but it was like some sort of like question, and I was just like, it was just like a small thing, but it was nothing that she said that was like wrong, but it's just one of those things that like when you know what is happening with her, it just makes you sad.
Yeah.
That she was like asking him about something like that, and he just kind of like moved on from it, but it was just like, oh God. But I'm pretty sure that what she asked was when they realized that the entrance was in the maze was in the forest.
Mhm.
She was like asking them like the entrance to the labyrinth is out here, and like she like genuinely didn't know that,
Yeah.
and it's just like showing how Luke doesn't tell her shit. Um, and
Yeah.
probably like holds all of the things that he does know over her head all the time.
I got it. I'm getting text to put one to bed.
Yes, yes,
And I know your battery is starting to go.
yes.
Okay. So, yeah, we leave with them dropping into the labyrinth. So next week when we'll pick it up, we'll get them wandering around lost because yeah, formulaic. Rick loves his formula of, like once the quest actually starts, there is a little bit of we're gonna wander. We have no idea what we're doing, and then suddenly we're gonna get attacked. That's
Yeah,
usually how it goes.
the only thing I could add on to the very end of this is we don't know if TikTok's going to be around after Saturday, and
Yeah.
so if it's not, we'll do these
You
on
on
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah. I totally
It's
forgot it's that close.
Yeah, people keep forgetting about it because no one's really talking about it because there's so much chaos happening.
Yeah,
Um,
it might get extended again from like a clip that I saw, but I'm
yeah,
not sure if an extension is realistic.
yeah, we just don't. We honestly have no idea. Like, we
So
won't
yeah,
know until like right before it happens. I generally hope that it doesn't because it is really sad. There's lots of like kids and other people that I like really like talking to on here, and it'll be a lot harder to talk to them anywhere else.
mhm,
Um, and so it
yeah,
just makes me upset to think that I found people that I really like to talk to, and for this app, especially considering the whole Signal thing,
mhm.
like members of our government were doing massive war plans on Signal, and the thing that they think is like jeopardizing our security is TikTok. When people in the administration were doing that on Signal, um, I think they're the problem actually, and not this app. Just saying.
Yeah,
Maybe them doing it on a freaking app and not in one of like the like high security areas that they have to use those things in is the problem, not like a social media app.
maybe. Oh gosh.
Maybe. And so
Yeah,
either way,
we'll let you
um,
guys know, and just in case, all of our accounts are usually linked. Follow us on YouTube for the pod stuff. Follow us individually. We're on Instagram. I need to get on more platforms like Blue Sky since Rick's on there. And yeah, so we will let you guys know as we figure out what's happening.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Bye.